Chapter 678. Following the underground path was indeed the best way to find the king stoneworm. But it was also very dangerous. After some discussion, Xiao Xian, Ao and Ta went down to search. There was no need to go with too many people. It would be inconvenient if there were too many people. They put a rope down from the cave and slid down. They didn't have long straw ropes, so they tied several straw ropes together. They slid down for about 100 meters before landing on the ground. This meant that the king stoneworm moved up from here, then retreated down this path. Then it changed directions and continued moving. Which way should we go? Ao looked at the two paths and couldn't make up his mind. There were two paths after they came down. One was the way the king stoneworm came from, and the other was the way it left. Xiao Xian looked carefully at the patterns on the stone wall. He touched the stone wall and pointed in one direction. It went that way, but let's go the other way first. Xiao Xian wanted to see if the king stoneworm came from that direction. Did it pass by Bat Mountain? If that was the case, then the movement of the bat leader could be explained. Ao and Ta understood what Xiao Xian meant, so they didn't object. They followed the direction the king stoneworm came from. Even though they were underground, Xiao Xian memorized the position on the ground before entering the cave. He had a universal eye in his hand. It can tell the direction without any sunlight or moonlight? Ta was surprised. Yes, Xiao Xian said. When he was asking the tribesmen about this, he heard them mention that they used the universal eye when they were underground. However, only people with high status in the tribe had the universal eye. After all, the universal eye was rare, so the Jing tribe didn't give it out often. To prove Xiao Xian's words, under the light of the water moon stone, a line opened up on the universal eye in Xiao Xian's hand. It was like a narrowed beast's eye. As the line expanded, the direction became clearer. Ao and Ta were both good with directions. As long as they knew the approximate position of the sun and estimated the current time, they could determine where Bat Mountain was. He continued to walk along the passageway. They came from there. Tower confirmed. The more they walked, the more certain they were that the passage came from the Bat Mountain. Increasing their speed, the three of them soon arrived at the Bat Mountain. How did he know that it was Bat Mountain? In addition to his own estimation, there was an upward passage there, but the passage didn't directly lead to the surface. It only extended from the underground for more than 20 meters. Do you think it's because the king stoneworm noticed the bat leader's tracks when it came here? That's why it wanted to go to the ground. But the bat leader reacted quickly and ran away as soon as the king stoneworm moved. Is it possible? Ao voiced out his speculation. That is indeed a possibility, Ta agreed. Bat Mountain should be above us. Even if it's not directly below us, it shouldn't be too far away. But why would the king stoneworm come out of its nest? Even if it's because of the cataclysm, after it came out of its nest, it should have returned after the cataclysm ended. Xiao Xian was puzzled. Maybe the king stoneworm wanted to change its location? Ta suggested. Xiao Xian didn't deny it. Let's continue walking in that direction. The three of them followed the direction the king stoneworm had come out of, and continued to run in the 100-meter underground cave. There wasn't enough oxygen here. The further they went from the small mountain, the thinner the air became. This wasn't the king stoneworm's nest, so there wasn't much ventilation. Fortunately, the three of them had a high tolerance for the thin air. If they were beginner or intermediate totemic warriors, they might not have been able to hold on. Ao and Ta also wanted to know why the king stoneworm was running around after it came out of its nest. However, they soon found out why the king stoneworm didn't run back, but ran in another direction instead. Not far from Bat Mountain, there was a fault where the passageway was cut off. Moreover, there were traces of the king stoneworm making a turn here. This place should have been like this for a while. Only the cataclysm last year could cause such changes underground, Ao said. That means the king stoneworm might have been shocked by the cataclysm last year, so it left its nest and ran here in the chaos. However, the underground was also greatly affected by the cataclysm, so it couldn't find its way back after it came out. Ta didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even if the king stoneworm couldn't go back the way it came, it could have gone somewhere else. Why did it continue to run away? What if it couldn't tell the direction? Xiao Xian suggested a possibility. Ao and Ta fell silent. A king beast couldn't tell the direction? Shouldn't the higher the level, the smarter it was? We can't rule out this possibility, Ao said in the end. Xiao Xian sensed the surroundings. The stone walls here are much thicker than the other parts of the passageway. Maybe the king's stoneworm stayed here for a longer time. The longer the king's stoneworm stayed in a place, the more petrified that place would be. Xiao Xian could sense that the surrounding stone walls were different from the stone soil underground. It was a special kind of stone that the king's stoneworm had petrified. Maybe the king's stoneworm left its nest during the cataclysm last year and ran here in a panic. It might have stayed here for a long time, or it might have fallen asleep. When it woke up, the original path had been cut off by the changes underground, so it continued to move forward. Xiao Xian didn't want to think of the king's stoneworm so badly, but this was the most likely possibility. If that was the case, the three of them could only sigh. This intelligence. No matter what the truth is, let's keep looking. Since they had reached the end of the passageway, the next step was to search in the direction the king's stoneworm had left. Hopefully, it wasn't in the direction of Yanjiao. The three of them were hopeful. They returned to the hill and told the others what they had found. After a short rest and some food, Xiao Xian and the other two continued to search along the passageway. 100 meters below the ground, the three of them ran along the same passageway. Along the way, the three of them found another hill that was similar to the one they had seen before. This proved that the king's stoneworm had appeared here before. It should have happened within the past 2 days. Xiao Xian looked at the petrified trees around the hill. Even the roots of the trees had been petrified, but the leaves on the treetops were still green and vibrant. The branches and leaves weren't wilting either. Based on his understanding of the forest, this wouldn't have happened more than 2 days ago. Let's keep looking. Ao was getting more and more anxious. Although they weren't heading directly towards Yanjiao, they weren't far off. Please don't head towards Yanjiao, please don't. Ao kept repeating these words in his heart. However, the further they searched, the heavier their hearts became. Xiao Xian looked at the universal eye in his hand and sensed their surroundings. This is the flaming river? How is this possible? Ao and Ta exclaimed at the same time. Were they already at the flaming river? But how could it be the flaming river? Wasn't the flaming river filled with water? That wasn't right either. Before the disaster, the river was more than 100 meters deep. After the disaster, the river wasn't that deep anymore. At most, it was a few dozen meters deep. Of course, some parts of the river might be even deeper. But now wasn't the time to think about this. Ao gathered his thoughts and pointed above his head. He asked Xiao Xian, "Are you sure this is the flaming river?" "Most likely. There aren't any hard rocks not far from here, so it should be muddy water. Further away there's water." Xiao Xian couldn't tell the exact distance, but he could sense that there were muddy water and muddy water above them. Compared to rocks, muddy water and muddy water didn't affect his senses as much. Plus, if they kept walking in this direction, they should be near the flaming river, upstream of where Yin Jiao's headquarters were. In the past, when Xiao Xian was free, he would let Cha-Cha carry him upstream for a while. So that means the king's stoneworm has already crossed the river? Ta asked. That's right. Although the king's stoneworm wouldn't have crossed the river towards Yin Jiao's headquarters, the three of them were slightly relieved. However, the flaming river trading point was also on the other side of the river. If that place was attacked, it would be a huge loss for Yin Jiao. Let's keep going. Ta was so worried, he wanted to pull his hair out. They had been on guard for so long, but they didn't see anyone from the other side. They also didn't see the troublesome bandit. They thought the bat leader was already a big problem, but they didn't expect an even bigger problem. If it weren't for their strong mental fortitude, they would have panicked too. No matter where the king's stoneworm went, the three of them would continue to search along this path. If we find anything strange, we'll retreat immediately, Xiao Xian said. Tracking the king's stoneworm was important, but his own life was more important. He couldn't afford to lose his life because of this. That was a king beast they were talking about. Plus, they were almost 100 meters underground. The terrain was advantageous for the king's stoneworm. If they really fought, the three of them would be crushed. As Xiao Xian and the other two continued to track the king's stoneworm. In a forest outside the Flaming River trading point. They were quite a distance away from the Flaming River trading point. After Yin Jiao expanded their patrols outside the trading point, some robbers had no choice but to retreat from their hunting area. They wanted to rob and get something, but they didn't want to go against Yin Jiao. What do you think those Yin Jiao people are thinking? What a busybody. Our robbery has nothing to do with them. A person sitting on a tree said as he played with a dagger made from animal bone. Who knows? I don't like them anyway. I won't go into the Flaming River trading point. A muscular man with a full beard and unkempt hair said in a low muffled voice. A voice came from the thick grass nearby. The last time I went there, those Yin Jiao guards almost burned a hole in me. TSK. Do they think I care about the things in their trading point? Even if they invite me next time, I won't go in. That's right, I won't go in no matter what. We'll just rob outside. Haha, we won't have to face those annoying Yin Jiao people, haha. Another person sitting on the tree said as he slapped his thigh. They were a group of robbers outside the Flaming River trading point. There were more than 20 of them hiding here. Originally, there were about 50 of them, but they were in other places. If they found any prey, they would be notified. When they robbed, they would only choose those traveling teams that had fewer people and seemed easy to bully. They would not risk robbing those who were obviously not to be trifled with. Robbing also depended on one's eyesight. Those who did not have good eyesight would not even know how they died, not to mention robbing. The robber who was torn to pieces a few days ago was one of them. He didn't have good eyesight and robbed a weirdo who looked more like a beast than a Yin Jiao. He deserved to be torn to pieces. As for the person who said he was almost burned a hole in his body by the Yin Jiao guards when he entered the trading point, it was actually because a Yin Jiao patrol outside the trading point encountered them. They even killed a few of them. Luckily, they ran fast enough and weren't caught. Not long after that, they decided to enter the trading point to take a look and see if anyone had good stuff. They would wait for those people to leave the trading point before making their move. The Yin Jiao guards felt that their auras were familiar, so they kept staring at them. They were so nervous that they almost ran back. However, after that incident, they never entered the trading point again. They were worried that they would be caught by the Yin Jiao guards. They hated the Yin Jiao guards who stopped them from robbing. The few of them were spitting spittle as they criticized the Yin Jiao guards. Suddenly, one of the people in the tree looked at them sharply. What's going on? An extremely dangerous aura filled the air, but he wasn't sure where it came from. He looked around and didn't see anyone else. Yin Jiao patrols wouldn't patrol here. Who's here? The others stopped talking and went on alert. The forest suddenly became eerily quiet. Only then did they realize that something terrible had happened. Before, they could still hear the chirping of birds, but they didn't pay attention to it. Now that they stopped talking, they noticed the change. The first person to notice that something was wrong had cold sweat dripping down his forehead. He still couldn't find the source of the aura. It seemed to be coming from all directions. Moreover, the feeling was getting stronger and stronger. Even the slowest person in the group felt a chill that made his scalp feel like it was going to explode. His hand holding his knife was shaking uncontrollably. Generally speaking, when they didn't know what was going on, they would quietly hide and observe. However, this aura that shook their minds made it impossible for them to remain calm. Where was it? Everyone held their breaths and observed their surroundings. Even the movement of a flying insect would be detected by them. Nothing. Still nothing. Where did that aura that made them unable to even muster the courage to resist come from? There was no one around, not even a bird. Even the insects seemed to have disappeared at this moment. It was dead silent. Even the wind seemed to have frozen. Crack, 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 crack. A faint sound came, stimulating their nerves. It was the sound of movement coming from beneath their feet. When they finally looked down, everyone was so scared that their souls almost flew out of their bodies. Chapter 679. On the ground, the originally green grass and leaves started to turn gray from bottom to top. They did not look as flexible as before, and became as still as stone. Not even the slightest tremor could be seen. No, it was not just the grass. On the ground, whether it was the soil or the flowers and trees, All of them were undergoing the same change. The brown bark, the green leaves, the yellow soil, all of them became the same color. Like the mutated grass, they became stiff. What was going on? How could it cause such a terrifying change to occur in this area? Manpower? No, they had never seen anyone who could change everything in such a large area like this. No matter what, the horrifying scene in front of them was beyond their knowledge. Looking at the changes that were spreading up from the ground, a cold chill penetrated the soles of their feet and spread to their entire bodies. It was as if they were not in the forest but trapped in a vast glacier. The trembling from their bones stimulated their nerves. They could not stay here any longer. Run! The people who reacted the fastest had already exploded with their greatest power. At this time, they could not think of hiding anymore. They tried their best to raise their totemic power to the limit. The aura that appeared on their bodies with the increase of their totemic power, if it was in the past, would be as obvious as a fire in the dark night. But at this moment, under the suffocating aura, it was like smoke rising in the wind. Before anyone could see it clearly, it had already disappeared. Pale tiny, they were originally staying on the tree, but now they were jumping to other branches like monkeys running in a panic in the forest. The great fear made them unconsciously let out some meaningless screams. Other than running for their lives, they didn't even have the time to think about anything else. From the corner of their eyes, they saw that the ground under their feet was no longer a land of life with a mixture of colors. It was a land of death full of gray. All the plants, the insects hidden in the ground and the insects in the leaves, none of them were spared. They had already felt some changes in their bodies. It was only because of the strong resistance of the totemic power in their bodies that the changes were slowed down. But with the rapid approach of the huge aura that came from nowhere, the totemic power in their bodies would soon be useless like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The trees around them had already started to turn grayish-white, as if an invisible hand was smearing the surroundings with grayish-white paint. Now that pair of large hands was sweeping towards them. Quick! Quick, quick, quick! Ah! A hysterical scream suddenly rang out. Those whose hearts were already filled with fear felt their hearts jump to their throats, and the chill on their backs became even more intense. Not only did the strong-willed people not stop, they even roared and ran even faster. He didn't dare to look back. He was worried that the little bit of courage, and the courage to run for his life, would be completely destroyed after he turned back. However, among these people, there were also some who turned their heads to look. After hearing the scream, they turned their heads to look at the place where the scream came from. They could naturally tell who the scream came from. Before this accident happened, that person was still hiding in the grass, squatting comfortably. However, when they turned their heads, they only saw a person whose legs had turned grayish-white on the ground. His hands that were supporting him on the ground were also rapidly undergoing the same change as his legs. The part of his body that was close to the ground was not spared. Moreover, this change was rapidly spreading to his entire body. The person who was lying on the ground, unable to escape, raised his head and looked in the direction that his companions had left. His eyes were filled with pain, fear, and despair. But soon, that pair of eyes became deathly still. Then, they were covered with a layer of grayish-white, until his entire body turned grayish-white like the surroundings. He was like a lifeless human statue. The top half of a grayish-white tree next to him snapped and fell, smashing onto the human statue. Bam! The human statue cracked. A crack that stretched from the left shoulder to the right waist split the human statue into two halves. Only the center of the crack had some red color. It looked like blood, but before the blood dripped, the only red color turned grayish-white. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. The people who saw this felt their minds explode. The little bit of air in their chest was suddenly diverted. They even forgot to breathe. Their legs turned to jelly, and the totemic power in their bodies became chaotic. In their panic, they neglected the branches in front of them and tripped. Two of them staggered and fell from the tree. If they were on the tree, they still had a chance to escape. However, after falling on the ground, their chances were slim. The fall just now did not feel like they had fallen on grass or mud. It felt more like they had fallen on a rock. If they did not look back, would they not have fallen? They did not care about the pain from the fall. nor did they have time to regret. They could only try their best to escape this place. They even swore in their hearts that they would never come to the Flaming River trading point again. However, they felt their legs getting weaker and weaker. They became heavy and stiff. They could not feel anything, as if they had lost control of their bodies. Thud. Finally, they could no longer run and fell. No, save me. They had also experienced what their comrade had felt before he died. However, this time no one would slow down. The people who were running at the front had already disappeared. Those who were slow to escape had the same fate as them. Soon, there were no more sounds in the forest. There was only an expanding grayish-white color. At the same time, Zheng Luo, who was guarding the Flaming River trading point, was thinking absent-mindedly. He already knew that Xiao Xian and the rest had noticed the bat leader and the king stoneworm's strange movements. His biggest worry now was not the people who had sneaked into the Flaming River trading point, but the elusive king beast. They had worked so hard to build a trading zone with a bright future. If a beast king were to show up, everything would be ruined. Boss, those people you mentioned, some of them went to look for EC. Duo Kong came in and said. When Zheng Luo noticed that people suspected to be from the other side of the sea had snuck into the trading point, he had asked Duo Kong to keep an eye on them. The weaker warriors were not up to this task. The other party's disguise could fool many warriors, but people at Zheng Luo and Duo Kang's level could tell. However, before they knew the other party's motive, they did not want to alert them. After all, there were a lot of problems at hand. After hearing Duo Kang's report, Zheng Luo wiped his face in annoyance. What did they do? I don't think they did anything. They just sat together and talked. They seemed to know we're watching them, but they didn't try to avoid us. Duo Kong did not know why they were here. Ignore them for now. Keep an eye on the surroundings. Boss, do you think that King Stoneworm will come here? Duo Kong was worried too. I don't know. Wait for news. Xiao Xian and the rest have already gone to track it. The forest is so big. It probably won't come here. Oh, Duo Kong scratched his ears and cheeks. He could not calm down. The experience of facing a king beast was a nightmare. He would rather die than go through it again. After sitting for a while, Duo Kong left again. Instead of waiting here, he would rather keep an eye on the suspicious people. The person that Duo Kong and Zheng Luo thought was suspicious was sitting in EC's house. He was wearing a hairless sleeveless shirt made of animal hide, coarse linen pants, and a colorful snakeskin belt around his waist. Several bags made of linen and animal hide were hanging from the belt. He wore an ornament made of animal bones around his neck. His exposed arm was painted with some dark green paint. His unkempt and coarse hair was casually tied up with a straw rope. Because his hair was not long, after it was tied up, it stood straight up towards the sky. His dressing was quite characteristic of the tribes, who often came to the trading point. The man sized up EC's house with a critical gaze. He smacked his lips and concluded, "This place is even better than the one you're living in." Of course. Why else would I come here? EC took out a ceramic cup and poured some water into it. He made this cup himself after coming here. The painting on it was also done by him. It was the same as the utensils he used on the other side of the sea. It was still more convenient to use something familiar. The person didn't hold back either. After drinking the water in the cup, he said, "Another cup. I ran around in the morning. It's so hot. But Yinjiao's trading point is not to be underestimated. The style is to my liking." "Don't tell me you're here to steal Yinjiao's place?" EC asked. "Of course not. I don't care about such a big place. But I do want to cause some trouble for Yinjiao. I want to see how capable they are. You guys sure know how to make fun of yourselves. But Yinjiao people aren't easy to provoke. Once they get angry, it'll be hard to stop," EC said. The person sitting across from him pursed his lips. He didn't take EC's words to heart. "We're from Chang'e. Why would we be afraid of them getting angry? Getting angry is the fun part. Wu He, since you lent me your long-winged bird, I'll give you a word of advice," EC said slowly. "Speak." The person sitting there swung his feet that were covered with tattered straw sandals, looking relaxed and at ease. "Don't provoke Yinjiao people. Even if you want to provoke them, now is not the time. Hey kid, I thought you didn't know the E family's divination skills? Why does it seem like you know something? Well, he didn't take EC's words to heart. He was from Changel. Perhaps no one here knew about it, but he was quite well known on the other side of the sea. Changel wasn't just a tribe. It was a special group of people with different backgrounds. They liked to take risks, and were very curious. In their words, most of the things in the world were boring, so they wanted to use their sharp eyes to find some fun. To put it more simply, they were a group of curious adventurers. They were also the first group of people to come from the other side of the sea. As for why they rarely showed themselves, it was because most of them hadn't mastered the language here. If they couldn't even communicate, how could they find any fun? If they wanted to ask for directions, it would be like a chicken talking to a duck. They wouldn't understand. If the tribesmen here were the most disgusted with robbers, then on the other side of the sea, whether it was the tribes or the slave masters, the most disgusted were the Changel people. They were a group of lunatics. When they were bored, they would go and provoke others. They built their own happiness on other people's troubles. When the people on the other side of the sea learned that the Changel people had crossed the sea and were heading here, they all breathed a sigh of relief. They felt like the flies that had been buzzing around them had finally disappeared. But now, no one knew that the Changel people's first target was Yinjiao. However, not all of them had crossed the sea. They were all holed up somewhere to train, learn the language, and gather information. One needed skills to be able to attract the ire of others. Wu He was just one of the people who had mastered the language here. EC wasn't angry at Wu He's sarcastic words. It's up to you to believe it or not. Since you lent me 2 long-winged birds, I'll say it again. You should leave this place as soon as possible. Something big is going to happen here. Aha, something big? That's even better. You shouldn't leave. As soon as Wu He finished speaking, he suddenly paused and looked in a direction. EC glanced at the sky outside the window, then looked at Grasshopper, who had been hiding in the corner. It's here. What's here? What do you mean? Wu He looked at EC, then at Grasshopper. Grasshopper had beast blood, so his control over his totemic power wasn't very precise. Normally, he couldn't completely hide his totemic patterns. But now the patterns on his body were even clearer, like those on a beast. His thick hair stood up like stone needles. Poochie, short spikes protruded from Ching Fu's back. His sunken eyes were filled with fear. He shrank into a corner. He was so big that he could touch the roof with a single jump. But now, he wanted nothing more than to bury himself in the ground. Why are you so scared? Wu He raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction of the strange aura. Because he was far away, he didn't feel it very strongly. But even so, it was enough to make his heart jump. It wasn't just them. Zheng Luo and the others in the Flaming River Castle, as well as the sharper people in the trading point, all felt it. What was going on? At the entrance of the trading point, Kuan Tu and the others were guarding the entrance, cautiously watching the people going in and out. Zheng Luo said there were suspicious people moving around the Flaming River trading point these 2 days, but they couldn't find out who they were. This could only mean that the other party was very skilled at disguising themselves. Suddenly, there was a sharp and urgent whistle from the patrol team. This was a warning signal. Someone's coming. Kuan Tu stared in that direction. Soon, they saw 7 people running out of the forest. But these 7 people were very strange. Their bodies were covered in different degrees of gray. At first they thought it was paint, but when they got closer, they realized it was more like stone. These 7 people looked crazy, as if they had seen something extremely terrifying. They roared hoarsely as they ran. When they saw Kuan Tu and the others, their eyes lit up and they shouted, "Help!" Not long ago, they said they would never enter the Flaming River trading point again. But when they ran for their lives, they split into 2 groups. One group ran to another place, but the 7 of them felt safer with more people. If there were more people, even if they ran, there would be others to share the burden. In this area, the only place with more people was Yinjiao's trading point. That was why they ran all the way here. Of course, Kuan Tu wouldn't let them enter the trading point, so he tied them up with the others. But the people who were tied up were still struggling, shouting at the top of their lungs, "They're coming! They're behind us, behind us!" Kuan Tu didn't know what they were talking about. He wanted to knock them out, But even though they looked crazy, they might know something. So he sent them to Zhengluo. When these people were struggling, the grayish-white stone-like things on their bodies seemed to be growing in their flesh. As they struggled and pulled, those stone-like places separated from their flesh. However, the 7 people did not care about the bleeding wounds on their bodies and continued to madly repeat those words. "Boss, what did they see?" Duo Kang's voice was shaking. Kuan too didn't understand, but Duo Kang already had a guess. He just didn't want to believe it. How could this be? How could he be so unlucky? No, it couldn't be what he thought. Duo Kang tried to brainwash himself. But in the next moment, Zhengluo shattered Duo Kang's hope. Zhengluo's voice was hoarse. He gripped his knife, so hard his knuckles turned white. "Spread the word, there's a king beast nearby." Thud! Kuan too let go, and the people who were tied up fell to the ground. King beast. Kuan too felt a chill run down his spine. The people who were tied up heard Zhengluo's words and struggled even harder. Their hoarse voices sounded like they were going to bleed. "Let me go. I want to leave. Leave." Why were they stupid enough to come here? They should have run as far as they could. Duo Kang didn't care about those people anymore. With Zhengluo's words in mind, he walked to the top of the flaming river tower, took a deep breath, and shouted, "All of you listen up. There's a king beast nearby. Everyone be careful." Zhengluo was an advanced totemic warrior. With his full strength, almost everyone in the trading area could hear his words. The bustling trading point froze for a moment, as if digesting this sudden news. But very soon it was an uproar. The king beast was here. This was like a bomb thrown into the water, creating huge waves in the flaming river trading point. The king beast was here. What should they do? Run, of course. Stay here and wait for death. Wu He, who was drinking water in EC's room, spat out the water in his mouth, threw the cup away and jumped out the window. "Why are you running? Didn't you want to watch the show? Didn't you want to have fun here?" EC shouted at Wu He's back. "We're here to have fun, not to die. You can stay here if you want." "Fuck, no wonder I'm trembling. It's a king beast." Wu He immediately ran out of the trading point. The trading point was in chaos. People were screaming and yelling as they packed their things and left. For people who rarely saw living ferocious beasts, beast kings were legendary creatures. But that didn't stop them from fearing beast kings. In the stories passed down by their ancestors, beast kings were invincible. Almost all people who went up against beast kings would die. However, there were also some exceptions among them. "Ha ha ha, I've waited for so many years and it's finally here. I'm not leaving, I want to see the king beast." Someone clenched his fists and shouted, his face red with excitement. The people around him looked at him, as if he was crazy. "You'll die if you don't run." His companions tried to persuade him again. "So be it. What's there to be afraid of? I want to see what a king beast looks like. I want to stay. Don't stop me." He was hopeless. Seeing how stubborn he was, the people around him gave up. There was no time to waste here. They quickly packed their things and left. Let the idiots who wanted to see the Beast King throw away their lives die there. Chapter 680. Because of Duo Kang's roar, all the traveling teams that were trading in the Flaming River trading point, as well as the tribesmen who had set up their stalls along the river, all packed up and left. They closed their windows and doors, took all their goods out, and rushed towards the 3 main doors. Some people did not have a clear idea of what a king beast was, but when they saw the others running for their lives, they were moved by the atmosphere. According to the others, it was not good to stay, so they should just run for their lives. Yinjiao's patrols and gatekeepers were summoned to the open space inside the Flaming River Castle. Zhengluo would tell them what to do next. Even with Zhengluo and Duo Kang here, the word King Beast was the biggest source of fear. "Boss, what do we do now?" Duo Kang asked Zhengluo anxiously. Zhengluo couldn't make up his mind. Who knew they would encounter something like this? "Let's see if there's any news from the tribe." Zhengluo had already sent someone back to the headquarters to inform them of what happened here. They would definitely send someone over immediately. No matter what, there's no use panicking now. Guard the trading point well, and don't let anyone take advantage of us. Duo Kang could only order his men to clear the trading point. Most of the outsiders would definitely leave, But only a few would stay. They had to keep an eye on those who stayed behind. Plus, they definitely wouldn't let those people run around at a time like this. They had to restrict their movements and send people to keep an eye on them. Soon Gigu brought his men over. When he heard the news, he wanted to slam the table. The thing he was most worried about had happened. Where's Xiaoxian and the others? Duokong had been waiting for them. When they encountered the salt beast in the salt mines, it was Xiaoxian who blocked it for them. Now the person he trusted the most was not Gigu, the current chief, or Xiaoxian, the former chief, but Xiaoxian the Grand Elder. The others who had the same experience as Duokong also looked at Gigu, wanting to hear from him about Xiaoxian. They haven't returned yet. Gigu had never faced a king stoneworm before, so he couldn't make the decision on his own. This time, it was the king stoneworm. In the entire Yinjiao tribe, Xian was the only one who had come into close contact with the king stoneworm. What should we do now? They were still in the forest and had not returned. If the king stoneworm came directly to the trading point, should we fight it? Or should I avoid it? Duokong was anxious. It was not hard to imagine the consequences of fighting the beast king head-on. He might be able to stop the beast king, but he would have to pay a heavy price. On the other hand, if he chose to run away, he would have to give up on the trading zone. Since the establishment of the Flaming River trading point, they had put in a lot of effort. No one could bear to give it up just like that. Prepare for both scenarios, Gigu said. If there's no other choice, we can only endure it. If we can't, we can only give up. It was impossible for more people to lose their lives because of this trading area. Let's hope that the king stoneworm is only there and will leave soon. I hope it doesn't come towards us, Guangyi sighed. At this moment someone said, if there's a fire seed. He didn't finish his sentence, but everyone understood what he meant. If the ancient fire seed was still there, it would definitely be a deterrent to fearsome beasts. Even if it was a king beast, it should still be effective. After all, Yinjiao's fire seed was stronger than the average small to medium-sized tribe. However, the ancient fire seed was about to disappear. There was always a price to pay. It was impossible for everything to be perfect. When it came to the fire seed, they could only choose one. They chose to merge. But didn't the Grand Elder say that as long as there are people, there will be a fire seed? There are many of us. When we gather together, we can release the fire seed's aura. Maybe it'll be useful? Kuan Tu said from nearby. Makes sense. Zheng Luo looked in the direction where the king beast had appeared. The aura did not come closer, but it did not leave either. Its presence was only getting stronger. Even the dullest people could feel the oppressive aura that made their legs tremble. Whoosh, Gigu whistled. He gestured towards the sky. Keep an eye on that direction. A snow-white shadow flew across the sky. It was Gigu's snow-white falcon. Cha-Cha was not here, so they had to let it go. After all, the sky was much safer than the ground. They could also observe the king stoneworm's movements clearly. While Gigu and Zheng Luo were discussing, the people who had rushed out of the trading point were all running away from the king beast. Of course, there were also people who wanted to take the opportunity to rob. After all, everyone had brought a lot of things with them. Some greedy people would inevitably have evil thoughts when they saw this. I can't believe they're still thinking of robbing at a time like this. In the sky, Wu He sat on a long-winged bird, looking down at the panicking crowd. However, those who could come here were not kind people. They might not lose to the fearsome beasts in the forest when they were angry. They did not hold back against robbers. You want to rob me? Fine, I'll at least leave an arm behind. Wu He patted his long-winged bird, gesturing for it to fly towards the king beast. Although he did not have the guts to stay in the trading point, he wanted to see what the king beast looked like from afar. Coo! The long-winged bird chirped unwillingly. It did not want to fly there. All beasts would not want to go there. Why would they go there? Did they want to die? I won't go near it. I'll just take a look from afar. You want to see what the king beast looks like too, right? On the other side of the sea, Wu He had gone deep into the forest with the Changel people when he was young. He had once felt the king beast's aura up close. Although he did not see what the king beast looked like, that soul-stirring feeling was still engraved in his mind. He remembered that the Changle old man who had brought him around had warned him to run as far as he could if he encountered a king beast in the future. Of course, suicidal people were a different story. Apart from that, those who did not want to commit suicide, but still went to the king beast were true warriors. Don't think that was a compliment. To the Changle people, true warriors meant the same thing as brainless idiots. Now, Wuxia had just arrived, and he had encountered another one. He could not help but sigh at his luck. Moreover, he did not want to commit suicide, and he did not want to be a true warrior. That was why he did not stay in the trading point like EC. Instead, he summoned his long-winged bird and flew away. However, Wuxia was like the other Changle people. He had an incomparably curious heart, and was afraid of death. That was why he would not go near the source of danger. Instead, he would sneak a peek from afar to satisfy his curiosity, so that he could show off when he met the other Changle people in the future. A Yinjiao even tamed a bird. Wuxia watched as the white figure flew out of the flaming river castle like lightning towards the king beast. Wuxia retracted his gaze and slapped the long-winged bird's neck. Did you see that? It's not even afraid of that size. What are you afraid of? Coo! The long-winged bird let out an aggrieved cry. Others might not understand, but Wuxia knew what it meant. The long-winged bird was saying that although the bird that flew out of the flaming river castle was small, it was fast and could escape much faster than them. Although the long-winged bird was unwilling, it could only listen to its master's orders. It flapped its wings and flew towards the king beast. After flying through a forest, they could see a path opened up in the forest. Compared to the other direction, there was not a single person here. Even flying beasts were nowhere to be seen. The king beast's deterrence was still quite strong. Wherever the king beast was, all other beasts would retreat. What kind of king beast is it? Wuxia looked down curiously until he saw a gray-white forest. Yes, a gray-white forest. The long-winged bird was already trembling, even if it was in the air, and would not come into close contact with the king beast. The king beast's aura made it feel suppressed even in the air. After flying in that direction for a while, it did not go any closer. Instead, it flew around the forest. The forest in front of it was all gray-white. There were no other colors. That's turned into stone. Wuxia was shocked. Such a large forest had actually turned into stone. As the long-winged bird flew around the forest, Wuxia saw the king beast that caused all this commotion. The king beast looked like a giant wriggling worm. Its color was not gray-white like the forest, but more like the color of melted rocks. Wuxia had been to a volcano before. The volcano's mouth had melted rocks all year round, but they were not crimson red like during an eruption. The only difference was that the color was different from normal rocks. Now this king beast's color was the same as the gray melted rocks he saw at the volcano's mouth. However, unlike the crater of a volcano, there wasn't any heat here. The temperature was still high, but when they approached the petrified forest, they felt a chill rolling around their bodies. The hair on the back of their necks was about to stand up from the wind. Wuxia did not go any closer. He just watched from afar. The king beast wriggled on the ground, making a rumbling sound. Everything in the forest, be it trees or rocks, was crushed into a smooth stone path. There were some bumps on the stone path, left behind by the king stoneworm's wriggling. It was as if nothing here was an obstacle. As long as it wanted to go, it could go anywhere it wanted. If a king beast like this ran towards the flaming river trading point, could the Yinjiao really stop it? Would the trading point that they had worked so hard to build be destroyed? But Wuxia thought about it again. He was just here to have fun. Who cared how the Yinjiao fought? He just needed to watch from the side. Now that he thought about it, he was looking forward to the battle between the flaming horns and the beast king. However, the king beast did not seem to want to go to the flaming river trading point immediately. Instead, it wriggled around in circles. Occasionally, it would raise its upper body and spit out a cloud of dust. Wuxia looked at the ground again. It had flattened a large part of the forest. As the king beast wriggled around, the petrified forest continued to expand. Wuxia could see the greenery turning into stone at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing the king beast turn the forest into stone, Wuxia couldn't help but shiver. The rhythm of the long-winged bird's wings also became chaotic. What is it doing? Wuxia could not understand the king beast's actions. The long-winged bird chirped anxiously again. It was not loud, as if it was afraid others would hear it. It wanted to leave this uncomfortable place as soon as possible. Wait, let me take a look. Well, he was really curious now. The king beast must have a purpose for appearing here, right? Was it looking for food? Or something else? Well, he scanned the gray-white petrified area. In the flattened forest, there was a small hill protruding from the ground. There was a large hole in the middle of the hill. The king beast must have come out from there. It came from underground. No wonder it appeared so suddenly. Just as Wu He was talking to himself, he suddenly saw 3 people running out of the pitch-black hole at the top of the short mountain. Yes, they were definitely humans. Even if he was a little far away, with Wu He's eyesight, even if he couldn't see the other party's appearance clearly, he was still certain that the 3 people who jumped out of the hole were indeed people. Who was so brave to come out of the king beast's hole? Thinking about how he didn't even want to get close to them, Wu He concluded, they're really fierce warriors. Even though the king beast was quite a distance away from the hill, it was the first time Wu He had seen someone brave enough to come so close. The 3 people who jumped out of the hole ran away like the wind. They did not even look at the king beetle. The person in the lead paused for a moment. At the same time, the wriggling king beetle stood up and looked in the direction of the 3 people. But that was all there was to it. After that, the beast king went back to the ground and wriggled around the area. The rumbling noise was deafening in the forest. As for the 3 of them, it was inevitable that there would be some changes in their appearance when they were escaping. The reason why Wu He couldn't see their appearances clearly was because most of their bodies were covered in a layer of grayish-white stone powder. Were these changes caused by the king beast? They're really brave, Wu He said again. If they ran a little slower and the king beast was a little closer to the hole, the 3 people might not have been able to escape so easily. The petrification of their bodies would have severely restricted their movements. Follow them. Wu He patted the long-winged bird and said, Caw. The long-winged bird chirped happily. It could finally leave this place. Wu He looked at the 3 people who jumped out of the hole and ran out of the petrified forest. After running for some distance, they turned around and ran in another direction. That was the direction of the Flaming River trading point. While following the trio, the leader looked up at the sky. Wu He knew that he had been discovered, but he didn't feel guilty at all. Instead, he smiled. He didn't know if the other party could see him. In any case, it was useless even if they knew that he was following them. Who asked him to be in the sky? This feeling of looking down on the ground from above, this feeling of greeting their ancestors, this feeling of not being able to touch a single hair on his body. This was fucking awesome. Wu He ordered the long-winged bird to fly lower. He wanted to greet the 3 people who had just escaped from the king beast. But before he could say anything, the person in the lead put a finger in his mouth and whistled. Wu He raised an eyebrow. What was the meaning of this? Calling for reinforcements? I'm not afraid. Before he could finish his sentence, the long-winged bird screeched and turned to leave. Its sudden reaction almost threw Wu He off. Hey, what's wrong with you? You're not listening. Wrong direction. Wu He wanted the long-winged bird to continue following the 3 people, but he sensed something and turned to look at the sky. An eagle that was twice the size of the long-winged bird was flying towards them from a higher altitude. Fuck. Run, run. Wu He urged. Thinking back to the news he heard, Wu He looked at the eagle that was chasing them. Was that the Yinjiao's giant mountain eagle? Did that mean the 3 people below were from the Flaming Horn tribe? Chapter 681. When Xiao Xian and the other 2 returned to the Flaming River trading point, it was already empty. Those who wanted to escape had already left. Those who didn't want to leave had been brought to a corner by the Yinjiao people. The patrols who were counting the people in the trading point almost attacked Xiao Xian and the other 2 as thieves. Grand Elder and the others are back. Kuan Tu shouted excitedly as he ran towards the Flaming River Castle. Duo Kong heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that Xiao Xian was back. No matter what happened next, with Xiao Xian around, he would feel more at ease. However, when they saw the state of Xiao Xian and the other 2, Duo Kong and Zheng Luo were shocked. How did you end up like this? Zheng Luo asked hurriedly. Don't mention it. It's all because of that king stoneworm. Tower slumped in his chair exhausted. He took a few gulps of water from the person beside him. This was the first time he was so close to a king beast. As expected, the fearsome beasts he hunted in the grassland, even the most troublesome ones, paled in comparison to a king beast. They were on a completely different level. The three of them were covered in grayish-white powder. Not only that, some parts of their bodies and clothes were grayish-white too. However, those parts had already turned to stone. Seeing Tower shake off a layer of hard stone on his arm, Duo Kong and the other's heart skipped a beat. There was already a piece of flesh on Tasho's forearm that had turned into stone. Fortunately, the area that was petrified was not too deep, and the injury was not too serious. However, when they saw that piece of flesh that was dripping with blood after shaking off the stone fragments, everyone present felt uneasy. If even the team leader couldn't avoid this kind of injury, how long could they last? Among Xiao Xian and the other two, Tower's injury was the most serious. While Tower was applying medicine, Ao also told everyone about the process of their chase and the conclusions and guesses they had made. Not long after they crossed the flaming river, they sensed the king's stoneworm's location. The underground tunnel led directly to the surface. However, there was a king stoneworm outside the cave. Ta and Ao did not know what to do. Should they retreat or charge out? At that time, Ta and Ao were more inclined to rush out directly, but they were stopped by Xiao Xian. Fortunately, Xian stopped us at that time. Otherwise, if we had rushed out at that time, we might not have been able to return safely. Ao sighed. Because they were not familiar with the king stoneworm, they did not have a clear understanding of the king beast. Even though they knew that the king beast was strong, Ao and Ta had thought that they could escape if they tried. They were confident in their speed. Besides, the king stoneworm was not near the entrance of the cave. At least they could follow its movements. As long as the king beast did not notice them, they could leave. It was only when Xiao Xian stopped them and found another opportunity to escape that they realized how naive they were. Even if the king stoneworm did not pay attention to them, it could still turn them into stone. So that means we can't even get close to the king stoneworm? Zheng Luo frowned. If they couldn't even get close, how could they fight? Were they going to be turned into stone like the forest? Don't move first. I'll rest for a while before we go take a look, Xiao Xian said. Since Xiao Xian had spoken, the others did not object. Yigu even told Xiao Xian about the original plan. Xian, you said that as long as we are there, the fire seed will be there. There are quite a few Yinjiao people in the trading point now. If we all work together, the fire seed's aura will be quite strong. Do you think it will be enough to deter the king stoneworm? Yigu asked. Please don't. Xiao Xian did not even bother to drink his water. What? Yigu did not understand what Xiao Xian meant. The others looked at Xiao Xian in confusion. Yigu was right. Wasn't the fire seed just a deterrent to fearsome beasts? Xiao Xian thought for a moment. There's something like a fire seed on the king stoneworm's body. How is that possible? Everyone gasped. They always thought that fearsome beasts were afraid of fire seeds. King beasts were still beasts. How could they have fire seeds? Even if they did, why didn't they sense it? It does have it, but it's different from the tribesman's fire seed. It's more like a fire seed unique to beasts. I felt it on the bat leader too. The difference was that the fire seed on the bat leader was not as strong as the one on the king's stoneworm, Xiao Xian said. When he saw the bat leader in the 1,000-grain gold field, he already felt something strange. Now that he saw the king beast, he finally understood what it was. It was a fire seed unique to beasts. Unlike the tribesmen, the fire seed on the beasts' bodies was unique to them. It did not look like a primitive fire seed either. Instead, it was fused into their blood. Moreover, based on the analysis of the fire seed on the bat leader and the king stoneworm, if Xiao Xian guessed correctly, the fire seed on the king stoneworm's body was formed by the two beasts themselves. Was the king beast's ability to condense fire seeds? Why were king beasts superior to other fearsome beasts? If fire seeds could exist on humans, why couldn't they exist on other beasts? In the past, Xiao Xian had been close to the bat leader and the king stoneworm. He had even fought the Salt King before. But at that time, he did not sense anything different from the three beasts. After bringing Zheng Luo and the others across the sea, and fusing with Yinjiao's fire seed, his strength increased by a lot, especially the light shield around his totemic flames. It was another special power that existed in Xiao Xian's body. He was getting better at using it. Xiao Xian also knew that the reason why he was not strongly rejected by other tribes' fire seeds, and could sense things that others could not, was because of the special power within him. He didn't know what that power was, but what he sensed was real. There was indeed a fire seed in the king stoneworm's body. It was a fire seed that belonged to beasts. Fire seeds could disperse and gather. Only fearsome beasts that could condense fire seeds could become kings. The fire seed in the bat leader's body was not obvious. It was just a trend. At most, it could only be considered a half-king. It was above fearsome beasts and below king beasts. If it could condense the fire seed in its body one day, it would become a true king. Ao and the others did not know why Xiao Xian said this, but Xiao Xian did not look like he was joking. In this aspect, they also believed that Xiao Xian would not speak without any evidence. If there really is a fire seed in the king stoneworm's body, won't we anger it if we release our fire seed energy? Duokong asked. Fire seeds usually repelled each other, so it was definitely not a good idea to anger the king beetle because of this. But if the king stoneworm comes towards us, we can only fight it. Duokong was worried. It was not a question of whether they should avoid it or not. They had no choice. I'll go take a look first. Xiao Xian had recovered. He did not shake off the layer of stone powder on his body. Instead, he left the trading point and headed towards the king stoneworm. Zheng Luo and Gigu followed closely behind Xiao Xian. One reason was to help Xiao Xian if necessary. The other reason was to see what the king stoneworm looked like. Xiao Xian approached the king stoneworm. He did not tell them everything in the trading point. When he sensed the strange fire seed energy in the king stoneworm, he also sensed the king stoneworm's mentality. Just like the totemic flame in Xiao Xian's mind, it would change according to the warrior's mentality and emotions. The king stoneworm did not have a totemic flame, but it had a similar fire seed energy. As the energy fluctuated, the king stoneworm expressed its thoughts and emotions. If it were anyone else, even if they sensed the fire seed energy in the king stoneworm, they might not be able to escape unscathed, because the fire seed would reject them. However, Xiao Xian's other energy was different. When Xiao Xian left the cave with Ta and Ao, he paused for a moment because he sensed this change. At the same time, he was not repelled by it. In order to leave quietly, the three of them did their best to conceal their totemic power in Yinjiao's fire seed energy. Although it would slow them down, it was safer. When the king stoneworm stood up, it might not have sensed their energy. Perhaps it was Xiao Xian's other power. This was because Xiao Xian did not feel any rejection from the king stoneworm. On the contrary, the king stoneworm seemed to be excited for a moment. However, after Xiao Xian completely blocked out the power and left, the king stoneworm did not notice it anymore. To verify his guess, Xiao Xian told Zheng Luo and Gigu to stay away while he approached the king stoneworm. He did not stand in the direction of the flaming river trading point. Instead, he hid somewhere else. This way, if the king stoneworm made a move and he escaped, the king stoneworm would not chase him in the direction of the trading point. Xiao Xian stood behind a tree that was still green. He looked towards the source of the rumbling sound. There, the king stoneworm was still wriggling aimlessly. Compared to when Xiao Xian and the rest left, the grayish-white stone forest had expanded. When the king stoneworm had its back to him, Xiao Xian suppressed the totemic power in his body and tried not to release the flaming horn's fire seed energy. At the same time, he tried to activate another type of energy in his body. Xiao Xian discovered this when he was practicing controlling the ancestral bone ornaments. The two powers in his body did not repel each other. It could even be said that this special power was assisting the Yinjiao's totemic power. Back then, he was able to achieve a different awakening than others. He was able to successfully carve and awaken the ancestral bone ornaments. He was able to absorb fire crystals before fusing with the fire seed. These were all because of this special power. Being able to master this power was a great improvement for himself. Putting away his other emotions, Xiao Xian slowly activated the other power. In his sea of consciousness, the totemic flames did not change much. However, the light shield outside started to brighten. Every time it flashed, it would become brighter by a bit. Gigu and Zhengluo did not understand what Xiaoxian was doing. They could only see Xiaoxian standing behind a tree. He did not move and his eyes were closed. They did not know what he was thinking. Why did he close his eyes instead of looking at the king's stoneworm? But soon, they realized that the rumbling in their ears had stopped abruptly. They looked over. In the stone forest, the wriggling king's stoneworm's upper body was slightly raised. Its massive body did not have feet, only rings of wrinkles on its body. It did not seem to have any hard armor, nor did it have any intimidating spikes. It did not even seem to have any offensive power. However, such a massive beast was able to make countless people and beasts tremble in fear. They did not even have the courage to fight back. When it turned to look over, Gigu and Zhengluo did not even see where its eyes were. They did not know how it saw. It only raised its upper body slightly. Its head was already taller than the tallest tree in the forest. In the distant sky, the long-winged bird that had finally escaped Cha-Cha's pursuit stopped. He looked over at the king's stoneworm. Even though he could not see it clearly, he could still see the silhouette beyond the forest. What's going on? He did not understand. Why did the king's stoneworm suddenly stop? It even looked around. His heart was itching again. He looked around and did not see the eagle again. He patted the long-winged bird. Let's go. Coo! The long-winged bird cooed softly, obviously unwilling. They had just escaped and now they had to go back. The eagle was still around. It would be killed. Let's go. Be careful. Something must have happened. His instincts told him that something was wrong. Could it be that the king beast was finally heading towards Yinjiao? Thinking about it this way, he was even more unwilling to miss this good show. No matter how unwilling the long-winged bird was, it would not disobey its master's orders. It could only slowly and carefully fly over. In the stone forest, the king's stoneworm turned its round head and scanned its surroundings. Finally, it confirmed Xiaoxian's location. Rumble! The sound of its enormous body crashing into the stone forest rang out again. This time, it was more urgent than before. The king's stoneworm moved even faster. Gigu and Zhengluo, who were hiding in the dark, saw the king's stoneworm moving towards Xiaoxian. They were anxious, and even whistled a few times to warn him. Xiaoxian did not open his eyes, but raised a hand to signal to Gigu and Zhengluo. He knew that the king's stoneworm was coming his way. The grayish-white was expanding towards Xiaoxian. When the grayish-white approached, Xiaoxian moved too. He did not run towards the flaming river trading point. Instead, he ran in the opposite direction. That way, even if something happened, it would not affect the trading point. As Xiaoxian left, the king's stoneworm followed. It sped up again. Although it was huge and surrounded by trees and rocks, nothing could stop it. Xiaoxian had to avoid obstacles when he ran, but the king's stoneworm ran in a straight line. Rocks blocked rocks and crushed trees. What is he trying to do? He was confused when he saw what was happening below. He could recognize that the person running in front of the king's stoneworm was the one who summoned the giant mountain eagle. He was a Yinjiao tribesman. What he did not understand was that the Yinjiao tribesman had clearly left. Why did he come back? And why was the king's stoneworm following him? Was he trying to lure the king's stoneworm away? Chapter 682. It was naturally a good idea to draw the trouble away instead of confronting it head-on. However, the prerequisite was that the trouble had to be really far away from here. Using one person as bait to lure the king beast away, while the rest stayed put. Could it be that Yinjiao wanted to sacrifice one person to protect the rest? He guessed as he watched the situation below. At the same time, Xiaoxian, who was circling the forest, had no time to pay attention to anything else. He was only focused on the king's stoneworm behind him. He circled the forest, and the king's stoneworm followed him. However, it was only heading in Xiaoxian's direction. Even if there was a mountain in front of it, it would not go around it. It would go straight through it. Wherever the king's stoneworm walked, it left behind a stone path with obvious wrinkles on the ground. The trees around the stone path all turned gray, and the caves it passed through left behind a straight tunnel. Just like how the king's stoneworm could move freely in its nest here, the mountain rocks were as easy as a wild beast stepping on the grass. Moreover, when it passed through the entire mountain, the sound it made when it moved through the mountain was much quieter than when it moved on the ground. Xiao Xian had been paying attention to the fire seed energy emitted by the king's stoneworm, as well as the fire seed energy waves on its body. This allowed him to guess the king's stoneworm's emotions. He realized that the king's stoneworm's emotions were not very strong. It could even be said that it was monotonous. Other than happiness and excitement, he could not sense anything else. Xiao Xian did not know if it was because his ability was limited, or because the king's stoneworm's emotions were not rich to begin with. He believed the latter. If the king's stoneworm's emotions were not rich, it would not be a good thing. In that case, Xiao Xian would not be able to sense clearly what it wanted to do, and what its goal was. Xiao Xian could only try and guess. Fortunately, at least until now, the king's stoneworm had not shown any hostility to Xiao Xian. In fact, there was even a hint of friendliness in its happiness. This did not mean that the king's stoneworm would not attack Xiao Xian, but it might treat Xiao Xian as one of its own, just like how the bat leader treated Xiao Xian as one of its own. The difference was that the bat leader didn't attack Xiao Xian, but the king's stoneworm didn't know how to control its power. If the distance between Xiao Xian and the king's stoneworm got closer, Xiao Xian's fate would be obvious. He would be turned into a stone forest. Zheng Luo and Gigu saw this, and guessed that Xiao Xian wanted to lure the king's stoneworm away. But how far did he have to lure it away? How was Xiao Xian going to get rid of the king's stoneworm? There's still Cha-Cha. Gigu looked up at the sky. Seeing that Cha-Cha was following them, he felt relieved. That's good, that's good. Zheng Luo was relieved. As long as the king's stoneworm was lured away, Cha-Cha could bring Xiao Xian back. The king's stoneworm couldn't fly anyway, so what if it was powerful? After thinking it through, He first took out a strip of cloth and wrote a few simple words on the cloth with a bamboo tube of paint that he carried with him. Then he called the snow-white falcon over and had it bring the cloth to the trading point. A white figure flew out from the forest with a piece of cloth tied to its leg. It flew straight towards the trading point, without looking at the long-winged bird in the sky. Duokong and the others were waiting anxiously at the trading point. They didn't see Xiao Xian and the rest for a long time, nor did they see any signs of the king beast. They could only walk around in circles, not in the mood to sit down and wait. Finally, seeing the white falcon flying over, Ao, who was lying down and resting, got up and untied the cloth tied to the falcon's leg. What did it say? Duokong and Ta hurried over. Gigu wrote it. He said that Xian has lured the king beast away. Ao said. Lured away? Duokong was confused. Was a king beast that easy to lure away? If it was that easy, why were they so afraid of the king beast? Back at the salt flats, the salt beast acted based on its own preferences and emotions. It didn't care about anything else. The king's stoneworm shouldn't have been that easy to lure away either. But since it was Xiao Xian who did it, it was possible. It's a good thing if it's lured away, Ta said. He didn't want to fight the king's stoneworm, because he knew what it was capable of. Without absolute power, fighting a king beast would be a waste of their tribe's manpower. The result might not even be satisfactory. Soon, the news that Yinjiao's Grand Elder had lured the king beast away spread throughout the trading point. Of course, there weren't many people in the trading point. They were all gathered in a few places, so it was reasonable that the news spread quickly. They lured the king beast away? The Yinjiao people were jubilant. On the other hand, the people who stayed were disappointed. They were prepared to die. They were just talking nonsense with the Yinjiao people, saying that if the king beast returned, they would help. But now they couldn't see it? What was the point of staying? Their lives were bleak. No, I have to leave. Someone suddenly rushed out of the crowd. The patrol team, who had relaxed after hearing the good news, didn't pay attention and let the person rush out. Even though the 3 main gates of the trading point were closed, the outer walls of the trading point couldn't stop people who were good at climbing and jumping. The patrol team couldn't leave just because of one person. They couldn't just leave like that. Even though the news from the Flaming River Castle said that the Grand Elder had lured the king beast away, They didn't have any other orders, so they couldn't just leave like that. Other than that person, a few more people left. The rest wanted to leave too. They wanted to see the king beast, but they were beaten up. At a time like this, the Flaming Horns did not want to cause more trouble because of these few people. Duokong also frowned when he heard the news. He was also worried that the people who ran out would interfere with Xiao Xian's plan. So he led a team to chase after them. If they interfered with Xiao Xian's plan to lure the king beast away, they would be killed immediately. Master, did the king beast really leave? Grasshopper looked anxiously in one direction and asked carefully. If he really lured the king beast far away, wouldn't you feel it? Not yet. EC looked at the spikes on Grasshopper's back that ran along her spine. When Grasshopper was scared, the spikes on his back would stick out. Although he had retracted them a little, the spikes on his spine were still standing straight. Ching Fu's brain wasn't very bright, but the beast's blood flowing in his body made him more sensitive to danger. Even if his brain didn't realize it, the instinct of a beast that was deeply embedded in his bones existed like a conditioned reflex. Grasshopper touched the spikes on his back and responded slowly. Oh, others might only be afraid of the king beast, but he was terrified of its aura. He almost peed his pants. On the other side, Xiao Xian did plan to lure the king stoneworm away. The fact that the king stoneworm was following behind him confirmed some of his guesses. But where was he going to lure the king stoneworm now? Leading it upstream? Or should it be directed downstream? Or central? If he lured it to central, he would probably make Yinjiao hate him. After all, many people knew about this, and it wasn't wise to hide it. Logically speaking, it was best to lure it to a place with fewer people. There weren't as many tribes upstream as there were downstream. The Rain tribe was just a little upstream from Yinjiao. If he lured it upstream, he would have to avoid the Rain tribe and the other tribes that Xiao Xian knew lived upstream. If it was just the Rain tribe and the other tribes, it would be easy. As he was thinking, Xiao Xian saw a river in front of him. This river was a branch of the Flaming River. It wasn't very big. During the driest times, he could see 2 large green rocks on the riverbed. But now there was still a lot of water, and the rocks were nowhere to be seen. Xiao Xian wanted to walk along the river, but after thinking about it, he gave up. Instead, he kicked down a tree that was as thick as 3 people and threw the trunk into the river. He gathered strength in his legs and his body shot out. When he landed on the surface of the water, he stepped on the tree trunk again and jumped to the other side of the river. This river wasn't very wide in this area. The riverbed was only about 10 meters wide. With Xiao Xian's ability and the help of the tree trunk, he could easily cross it. But the king stoneworm behind him couldn't do the same. Xiao Xian knew that it could easily crush rocks and trees. But what about the river? Should he cross it directly or burrow under the riverbed? After running for a while, Xiao Xian turned around and looked behind him. The king stoneworm had followed him to the riverside and stopped. It looked at the water, then raised its head slightly to look at Xiao Xian. It was probably thinking about how to cross the river. Xiao Xian didn't sense any big changes in the king stoneworm's emotions. Perhaps this little problem was nothing to it. Just as Xiao Xian was guessing how it was going to cross the river, the king stoneworm moved. It didn't burrow into the ground, but continued to walk towards Xiao Xian, as if the river didn't exist. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of water freezing could be heard. Xiao Xian saw that as the king stoneworm approached, the water in the river froze, as if it was frozen, spreading outwards from where it was closest to the king stoneworm. What was different from the frozen river was that the water in that area was the same as the forest, turning into a grayish-white color. The water had turned into stone. Without changing its wriggling posture, the king stoneworm continued to walk as if it was walking on flat ground. However, under the king stoneworm's body, as it moved forward, a stone path was laid out on the surface of the water. It was like a moving train with a track laid out in front of it. It only needed to keep moving forward. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Xian looked at the king stoneworm that was about to cross the river. He turned around and continued running. This time, he made a U-turn and returned to the riverside. Then, using the same method, he jumped over the river with the help of the tree trunk. The king stoneworm behind him also used the same method to cross the river. forming a stone path on the river surface. An idea suddenly popped into Xiao Xian's head. Thus, the group of people who were chasing after the king stared at Xiao Xian, who was originally running away from the flaming river, returning with the king beast. Chapter 683. What's going on? Why is he back again? What are they trying to do? The people who had come to see the king beast felt that it was better to turn around and run after seeing it. No one dared to go any closer. Even if they weren't in danger yet, they could feel the oppressive aura that made them tremble in fear. The petrified forest they saw along the way had really shocked them. Just one look was enough. They just wanted to keep a safe distance from the king beast. That was why when they saw the Yinjiao Grand Elder, who was said to have lured the king beast away, running back, they didn't have time to think and quickly ran away. As Xiao Xian ran back, he called Gigu over and said a few words to him. Then, he led the king beast in a circle, giving Gigu time to inform the people at the Flaming River Castle. Because Xiao Xian and Gigu were far away, the others didn't know what they were talking about or what they wanted to do. They only saw Xiao Xian running away with the king beast, while Gigu ran back to the Flaming River Castle. Xiao Xian asked Gigu to inform the people at the Flaming River Castle that he was running with the king beast towards the Flaming River. They might be close to the Flaming River Castle for a while, so they should be prepared. They shouldn't release their fire seed's aura and try to hide it as much as possible. That way, the king beast wouldn't notice them. If the king beast didn't follow Xiao Xian and ran towards the Flaming River Castle, they should evacuate first. The Flaming River Castle could be rebuilt if it was destroyed, but it wasn't wise to fight the king beast. Moreover, Xiao Xian had been running with the king stoneworm for a long time. He had some understanding of the king stoneworm's strength. Although it wasn't complete, he was sure that this king stoneworm wasn't any weaker than the salt beast he saw on the other side of the sea. If the two were to fight together, the salt beast would be at a disadvantage. Even if Xiao Xian lured this giant beast away now, it wouldn't be a long-term solution. No one could guarantee when it would come back. The best way to solve the problem was to bring it back to its nest. According to Xiao Xian's guess, this king stoneworm had no sense of direction and couldn't find its way back. However, if things weren't as he thought, and the king stoneworm didn't want to go back to its nest, then luring it to the forest filled with fearsome beasts was a good solution. It was better than leaving it at the Flaming River. After all, there were many tribes here, and no one had the confidence to kill it directly. Hoping that several tribes would work together to fight the king stoneworm, he was afraid that not only would that not happen, but it would also make everyone blame the Flaming Horns tribe. Since the king stoneworm wasn't afraid of water, why not lure it to where it should stay? This was the conclusion Xiao Xian came to after careful consideration. Gigu conveyed Xiao Xian's message to the trading point. At the same time, he had the snow falcon bring a letter back to the headquarters. Both sides had to be prepared just in case. Against a king beast, they had to be more prepared. After Xiao Xian led the king stoneworm in a few circles, he looked up and saw Gigu's snow falcon flying across the sky. He knew that the other side was ready, so he turned around and headed towards the Flaming River. The king stoneworm was also in a daze. Xiao Xian was obviously leading it in circles, and it kept following him in circles without much emotion. If this happened to the salt beast, it would have gone mad. That was to say, not all beast kings were the same in terms of intelligence, but everything had to be balanced. If a king beast didn't have a high IQ, then it must have a high innate talent. Just like EC's half-beast human slave, who didn't have a high IQ, he used his innate talent to make up for it. There was a reason why he was able to intimidate others. It was undeniable that this king stoneworm was freakishly strong. If it was left unchecked, it would definitely stir up chaos in every part of the continent. Inside the Flaming River Castle, after Gigu's announcement, Yinjiao's team leaders gathered and told them what to do next. Sensing the changes in Yinjiao's team, EC was puzzled. Even if he could calculate the probability of something happening based on many details and predict what would happen next, he had too little information. Even if he knew that Yinjiao had a plan, he couldn't figure out what it was. Just as he was thinking, EC suddenly heard a gurgling sound. He turned around and saw Grasshopper curled up into a ball. The gurgling sound came from his teeth chattering. EC looked at his back. Originally, only his spine still had thorns, but now several thorns were popping out. The thorns that had been retracted before were all coming out now. That was a clear indication of the Beast King's whereabouts. Didn't they lure the King Beast away? Why was it approaching again? Grasshopper wasn't the only one who sensed the King Beast's approach. The others in the Flaming River Castle also sensed the King Beast's presence. What's wrong? Is the King Beast here? The people who weren't allowed to leave looked forward expectantly. They felt that the houses in front of them were an eyesore. So they jumped to the roof of the tallest house around them. From there, they could see beyond the outer walls of the trading point. However, there was a forest outside the trading point. So in the end, they set their sights on one of the towers on both sides of the trading point's main entrance. Yinjiao's team just wanted these restless people to calm down. At the same time, they were also curious. Ta, who had already rested, led a team to the tower near the main entrance and looked forward. There were 3 main entrances to the trading point. Only this entrance faced the direction that Xiaoxian planned to go through. Rumble, Ta's expression changed. It's here. He knew that it was the sound of the king's stoneworm wriggling. Although the sound was still far away, he couldn't help but tense up. He was so nervous that his forehead started to sweat. When he came into close contact with the king's stoneworm, the feeling of petrification, that even his totemic power couldn't resist, the helplessness of defeat, was still fresh in his mind. There was no way he could relax. With Ta's reminder, the others also became nervous. Even the people from the other tribes who had been clamoring to see the king beast were now silent. They stared unblinkingly in that direction, their fists clenched tightly. Their palms were sweaty. They heard the sound too. Just because they wanted to see the king beast didn't mean that they weren't afraid. Even if they were fearless before, they couldn't help but feel nervous now. The air seemed to be filled with the smell of stone powder. The forest was silent, as if all the creatures living in it had been strangled. The rumbling sound was getting closer and closer. Whether it was the people standing on the tower, or the people standing on top of the Flaming River Castle, they could all see a gray-white line approaching from the forest in the distance. It was heading towards the Flaming River. Is that the king beast? Someone asked in a low voice. Even without the Yinjiao people's reminder, they didn't dare to make any noise. Even if they were still far away, they subconsciously lowered their voices as soon as they spoke. That's where the king stoneworm is. Wherever it goes, everything will turn to stone, whether it's trees or people. Everything will turn to stone. Ta's tone was calm, but if you saw the expression in his eyes, you would know that he was looking in that direction with fear and caution. Hearing this, everyone sucked in a deep breath. Even if they weren't there, they could imagine what the Yinjiao people were talking about. Someone gulped and stammered. It's really powerful. Of course, the king beast. How can it not be powerful? The person next to him tried his best to put on a calm face, but his true feelings were exposed as soon as he spoke. As someone who rarely even saw fearsome beasts, one could imagine how shocked he was when he saw a king beast. But soon, everyone's attention shifted from the king beast to the Yinjiao people's goal. Didn't you say that you've lured it away? Why did you lure it back? EC asked. He was the calmest person among the non-Yinjiao people. Ta glanced at him. We have our reasons for doing this. He didn't want to say more. In fact, he wasn't sure either. Xiaoxian's plan was crazy. He wouldn't have thought of it even if he was beaten to death. But after thinking about it, it really was the best plan. Let's wait and see. Ta said dryly and didn't say anything else. Who was in the mood to talk now? Even though the king beast wasn't heading in their direction, it wasn't too far from the Flaming River trading point. Everyone could even see the green forest turning into a grayish-white petrified forest. Those who didn't have a clear understanding of beast kings felt their knees go weak and cold sweat trickled down their backs. They opened their mouths several times, wanting to say something, but no words would come out. They could only stare at the beast kings with their eyes wide open. The muscles on their faces twitched, giving them a ferocious look. Rumble, The wriggling sound of the king's stoneworm was like thunder in everyone's hearts again and again. Unknowingly, everyone in the trading point started breathing cautiously. They couldn't see Xiaoxian leading the king's stoneworm. They couldn't even see the king's stoneworm's figure in the petrified forest. But the grayish-white expanding in their field of vision left a deep impression on them. This was a king beast. Those who were clamoring to fight a king beast now felt that they were so naive and stupid. But no one mocked him at a time like this. Everyone's eyes followed the expanding grayish-white until the rumbling in their ears weakened. The king's stoneworm was already in front of them, heading towards the flaming river. Only then did they come back to their senses. "You all stay here. I'll go take a look." Ta jumped down from the tower and ran towards the flaming river. The trading point was safe for now. He wanted to go take a look. Chapter 684. Other than the people at the flaming river trading point, some of the people who were supposed to leave were also paying attention to the king's stoneworm. Among the first batch of people to leave, how many of them actually wanted to leave instead of hiding in the dark and waiting for an opportunity to rob the trading point? The Yinjiao people had a lot of good stuff, and they were jealous. Usually, they were afraid of the Yinjiao people's strength, so they didn't dare to make a move. But now, wasn't this the perfect opportunity? If they didn't make good use of this opportunity, they would be letting themselves down. Although it was dangerous, it was necessary to take risks if they wanted to reap greater rewards. However, they didn't expect things to develop so differently from what they had expected. Until now, they still hadn't made a move. Even the teams that were far away from the flaming river trading point still sent people to keep an eye on the movements around the trading point. Hence, although they were slower to find out what was going on around the trading point and the flaming river, they still had a rough idea. At this moment, Xiaoxian didn't have time to care about other people's feelings. He only had his eyes on the king's stoneworm behind him to make sure it was still following him. After passing through the forest, the flaming river was just ahead. Perhaps they had sensed the king beast's presence. The piranhas that used to be active in the river were all avoiding them. Without stopping, Xiaoxian took a deep breath and whistled. Cha-Cha, who had been following him in the air, flapped its wings and dived down. Xiaoxian grabbed Cha-Cha's claw with one hand and was brought to the top of the flaming river. This was the most important part of the plan. The king's stoneworm's actions were the key to their success. In the forest, Gigu and the rest were getting more and more nervous. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly as they prayed in their hearts. "Ancestors, please protect us." This was not the small river from before. The flaming river was a few hundred meters wide and close to 1,000 meters wide. How was the king's stoneworm going to cross such a huge river? Actually, according to Xiaoxian's plan, there was an ideal situation and a less ideal one. Of course, even if things didn't go as planned, as long as the king's stoneworm could cross the river, it would be good enough. The method of crossing the river was secondary. Their safety was more important. Did he come directly from the bottom of the river? Or should they go deeper into the river? Or, Xiaoxian grabbed Cha-Cha's claw and looked at the king's stoneworm that had stopped at the shore. Come here quickly. Head this way," Xiaoxian shouted in his heart. In the sea of consciousness, the light shield that enveloped Yinjiao's totem flames grew brighter and brighter. The king's stoneworm that had stopped by the shore lifted its upper body, as if it wanted to see what was in front of it clearly. Those who were hiding in the forest could see the king's stoneworm's head clearly. Only half of its body was visible, but it was already taller than the tallest tree in the area. No one could ignore it. To the king's stoneworm, when everything around it was unfamiliar, it would naturally choose to follow a fire seed source that was close to it. However, the river in front of it made it pause for a moment. It only paused for a moment. As the river surface closest to it turned grayish-white, the front half of its body, that had been raised up, lay down again. On the surface of the river, where the front half of the king's stoneworm's body touched, the river water had turned into a grayish-white stone ground. Even the ripples on the water were very clear, retaining the shape they had when they were blown by the wind. However, as the king's stoneworm wriggled forward, the ripples no longer remained. Instead, They were replaced by the signature marks of the king's stoneworm. Crack, crack, crack. The petrified water surface was still spreading rapidly. The king's stoneworm was like a petrified projectile. The water around it had turned into stone. However, compared to the large-scale petrification in the forest, the petrification on the water surface was more concentrated. It was only under the king's stoneworm's body and the areas around it. At this moment, the king's stoneworm's entire body was above the flaming river. Xiao Xian took a deep breath. He was excited. Things were going according to his plan. It was the most perfect route. The king's stoneworm did not sink to the bottom of the river. It did not burrow underground. Instead, it continued to travel on the river. Nothing could stop it. Nothing. Even if it was a river that was hundreds of thousands of meters wide. Something that people thought was impossible was happening because of the wriggling of the beast king. This was the power of a king's stoneworm. It was worthy of the title king. As the king's stoneworm continued to move forward, Xiao Xian had Cha-Cha bring him to the other side of the river. They controlled their speed and direction. They did not deviate from the route, nor did they go too far or too close. They maintained the most suitable position and flew forward. This was only the beginning. A long, straight bridge appeared in front of everyone's eyes. As the enormous body moved forward, it gradually extended forward. In the air, Wu He, who had been watching the scene, was so shocked that he almost fell off his long-winged bird. So that was it. To think that he actually had such a plan. They were using a king's stoneworm as a laborer. How did they think of this? What a bunch of lunatics. Wu He wasn't the only one who was stunned. The people from the other tribes were also stunned. Even Duo Kong and the others who were leading the team to help were stunned. They wanted to rub their eyes and pat their heads to see if they were hallucinating, because they were too nervous and tired. Although they knew what Xiao Xian was planning, they did not expect this to happen. As the king's stoneworm wriggled, a stone bridge that extended from one side of the river to the other appeared above the vast flaming river. It could even turn water into stone. At the same time, some people were wondering how such a cumbersome king's stoneworm could travel on the water, as if it was flat ground. Even if it could turn water into stone, the stone it formed might not be able to support its heavy body. Could it be that the stone had reached the bottom of the river and was forming a stone bridge that cut off the flaming river? No, that was impossible. The flaming river looked very deep. How could it be cut off so easily? The water did not look like it was cut off either. Then was this bridge floating on the water? Otherwise, how could it support such a huge king stoneworm? But how could a stone float on the water? It went against common sense, and no one could understand it no matter how hard they thought about it. While they were shocked by the scene on the river, they were also confused to the point of going crazy. Unimaginable. They thought that the Yinjiao people would lure the king's stoneworm to another place because of its threat, but they were surprised to find that they had lured the king's stoneworm back to the flaming river. Only now did they understand what the flaming horns were planning to do. The flaming horns were truly unfathomable. If the Yinjiao people knew what the others were thinking about them, they would cry out that it was all the first elder's idea. They were just carrying it out. They were just as shocked as the others. On the roof of the flaming river tower, Ao and a group of Yinjiao people were observing the king stoneworm's movements. However, as Xiao Xian lured the king stoneworm away, they could not see that far no matter how good their eyesight was. On the other side, Ao Zheng was using a telescope to observe the movements above the flaming river. From time to time, he would exclaim, "How can this be? How can this be?" So this was Xian's plan. The others scratched their ears and cheeks when they heard this. They stopped looking at flaming river and stared fixedly at Ao. They thought, "Elder Ao, why don't you say something and let us know what's going on over there? Why don't you show us the telescope?" Something unexpected must have happened for the former chief to be so shocked. It must have been far beyond everyone's imagination. Something strange must have happened. They wanted to rush over to the Flaming River Castle to see what was going on, but they had to stay here. After all, the trading point, especially the Flaming River Castle, had to be guarded to prevent people from taking the opportunity to steal. Unfortunately, Ao was too engrossed in his stare and did not notice the reactions of the others. He did not have the slightest intention of letting go of the telescope either. The stone walls on both sides of the king's stoneworm were more than 7 meters wide. Including the king's stoneworm's body, the stone bridge was more than 20 meters wide on average. If they wanted to build a long bridge over such a wide river, it would not be easy even if they had more advanced technology, let alone the current technology. But now, a long stone bridge without any piers was gradually taking shape. Not only that, the king's stoneworm was wriggling steadily across the river, without any change in speed. Very good. This risk was worth it. Xiao Xian looked at the long gray-white bridge that spanned across the river. He suppressed his excitement and the urge to immediately test the sturdiness of this stone bridge. He let out a long sigh. There was no rush. It would not be too late to go back and test it after everything was over. Xiao Xian had made a few preparations. Now, things were progressing smoothly according to his expectations. It was the most perfect route. It was even better than what he had expected. Even Xiao Xian himself had underestimated this king's stoneworm. Although it was a little slow, there was no doubt about the king's stoneworm's valiant ability. 1/5, 1/3, 1/2, 2/3 this miraculous stone bridge was about to be completed. The people who were staring at the river stared until their eyes were dry. They could not bear to blink, afraid that they would miss an important moment. They were very glad that they had come along to witness the birth of such a miracle. The wind picked up and became stronger. It blew down from the upper reaches of the flaming river, causing waves to crash against the stone bridge behind the king's stoneworm. Boom! The waves splashed into splashes. However, no matter how hard the waves crashed, the stone bridge that looked like it was floating on the water did not move at all. It was as if it was proving to the world that it was sturdy. Chapter 685. Yanjiao's people were also paying attention to the situation. Many of the patrols were hiding nearby. According to Gigu's message, they had to maintain a safe distance from the king's stoneworm. If they got too close, there was a risk of being petrified. Everyone breathed softly and tried their best to hide their presence. Before they received orders, they only needed to stay here and watch. They were not allowed to make any moves or expose themselves too early. They would wait and see. On the other side, Xiao Xian had already been brought to the riverbank by Cha Cha. After landing, he saw the king's stoneworm following closely behind him. He didn't stay for long and ran towards the forest. The king's stoneworm finally reached the riverbank. It paused for a moment, then started to follow Xiao Xian again. The long bridge that crossed the flaming river extended all the way to the riverbank and connected with the king's stoneworm's wriggling trail. A large area of the riverbank had turned gray. After reaching the riverbank, the king's stoneworm returned to its original state. It rumbled again. It didn't look back at the long bridge behind it. It didn't care about its shocking actions. Perhaps it wasn't anything special to it. It just continued to follow Xiao Xian. The Yanjiao patrols hiding in the forest watched the king's stoneworm leave with Xiao Xian. After they were far away, they let out a long sigh. They were also shocked by what they saw on the river. It left. Yes, it left with the first elder. It probably won't turn back. What's that on the river? What did the king's stoneworm make? That should be called a bridge? I heard the first elder mention it before. But he said that his abilities were limited, so he couldn't build it, someone said. So the bridge is built now. Is that it? Another person pointed at the gray bridge on the flaming river. Should be. Why don't we go take a look? Let's not. We'll wait for the first elder and the others to come back. Wei stopped the person who wanted to go over. Hey boss, look over there. Someone's coming. The person behind Wei shouted towards the opposite shore. Wei looked over. There were indeed people on the other side of the flaming river who had stepped onto the gray bridge. I think it's Leader Duokong. Oh, and Leader Ta. Elder Zheng Luo and Chief are here too. On the other side of the flaming river, Duokong brought his men to the side of the newly formed gray bridge. Yigu, Zheng Luo and Ta, who came from the flaming river trading point, all came to the side of the bridge. Because the king's stoneworm paused here before crossing the river, the area of petrification at this end of the bridge was larger than at other places. Yigu stepped on the petrified grass under his feet. The petrified grass here was slightly harder than the ones in the forest. When he stepped on the petrified grass in the forest, he could still hear cracking sounds. But here, he couldn't break the grass without using some force. Let's go take a look, Zheng Luo suggested. Give it a try. Tower was also looking forward to it. Let's give it a try. As the current leader, Gigu led the way and stepped onto the stone bridge. If the king's stoneworm could walk on it steadily, all of them added together wouldn't be as heavy as the king's stoneworm. Logically speaking, they should be fine too. Gigu, Zheng Luo, Duokang, and Ta stepped onto the new bridge. Behind them, Duokang's team of Yinjiao warriors followed. To them this was a new experience. After Gigu stepped on it, he stepped on it with some force. The hard stone surface under his feet made him feel more at ease. It was very hard and firm. As expected, a place that could withstand the king's stoneworm's weight wouldn't collapse so easily. After the first step, the second and third steps were even faster. They were nervous at the beginning, but after walking for more than 10 meters, their steps became more relaxed. They could walk. They could really walk on water. Those who stepped onto the stone bridge felt the firm ground under their feet and the waves on both sides of the bridge. They took deep breaths. The waves splashed against the stone bridge and splashed onto their bodies. The layer of stone powder that covered their bodies from following the stoneworm was washed away by the water. The stone powder was from the dust caused by the king stoneworm's movements. It wasn't from the stoneworm's body, so when it was washed away by the water, it mixed together. Everyone who stepped onto the bridge had grayish-white stains on their faces and bodies. They looked very haggard, but at this time, no one cared about that. They just wiped their faces and couldn't help but smile. With a long bridge here, it would be more convenient for Yinjiao. After all, ships weren't everything, and they didn't have as many giant mountain eagles as the Hui tribe. Even if they did, it would still be inconvenient. However, if there was a long bridge that spanned across the two shores, then everything would be much simpler. If they wanted to transport goods between the Flaming River Trading Point and the Flaming Horn headquarters, they could do so at any time, rain or shine. In the future, when they controlled both sides of the Flaming River, even tribesmen who couldn't follow them on the ships could travel between the two sides easily. This bridge connected the two sides of the Flaming River. Yinjiao's group of about 30 people attracted the attention of hundreds of pairs of eyes. Wu He, who was in the sky, and the people from the other tribes who were hiding in the forest behind them, as well as the people from the headquarters on the other side of the bridge, were all staring at their movements. They craned their necks to watch them walk from one end of the bridge to the other side step by step. They really can walk across. A tribesman who was sent by an expedition team to scout the situation stared at the back of the group on the stone bridge. His voice was full of surprise. I want to walk across too, but that's Yinjiao territory. Another person hiding behind a tree stared at Gigu's group. Some of the braver ones came out of the forest and walked to the side of the stone bridge. However, they didn't dare to step on it directly. From their point of view, since the Yinjiao made this place, it definitely belonged to the Yinjiao people. Without the Yinjiao's permission, it would be considered trespassing and provocation if they stepped on it. After the incident with the king beast, they were even more wary of the Yinjiao people, so it was better to be cautious. However, looking at the stone bridge in front of them, their hearts itched unbearably. Someone quickly went over and stepped on it. Then, like the wind, they ran into the forest and hid. It could be considered a personal experience, and they were addicted to it. The others watched the figure disappear into the forest like the wind, then looked at the bridge not far away. They gritted their teeth, took 2 big steps forward, stepped on the bridge, then quickly retreated and ran away. In the sky, Wu He, who was sitting on his long-winged bird, watched the Yinjiao people successfully walk from one end of the bridge to the other. He secretly decided that when he saw the other Changles, he would brag about it. It wasn't easy to witness the birth of such a miracle. Luckily, he was brave enough at the crucial moment. Otherwise, if he left just like that and heard about it from others, he would definitely regret it. Regardless of how the others felt, Xiao Xian continued to lead the king's stoneworm into the forest. The king's stoneworm wouldn't discuss when to rest with Xiao Xian. As long as it continued to follow behind, Xiaoxian couldn't stop. He kept running towards the king stoneworm's nest. However, the king stoneworm had probably used up too much energy to cross the river. When it reached the bank, it slowed down quite a bit. To it, wriggling on the ground was more difficult than underground. Stoneworms ate rocks. Xiaoxian wasn't sure what the king stoneworm ate. Whether it ate rocks, soil, or the unknown stones deep underground, it was all underground. It was used to wriggling underground, so of course it was very uncomfortable on the ground. Therefore, not long after it reached the bank, the king stoneworm burrowed into the ground. Of course, it still followed Xiaoxian. It didn't burrow into the ground, but kept a distance from the surface. This allowed it to wriggle underground and sense Xiaoxian's presence. It followed closely behind Xiaoxian. Perhaps it had used up a lot of energy to cross the river, and with the 2 days of running, the area of petrification had narrowed. After the king stoneworm burrowed into the ground, the vegetation on the ground wasn't petrified. However, if a layer of grass was removed, the petrified soil would gradually be revealed. Xiaoxian could sense the king stoneworm's location. He didn't stop. As he brought the king stoneworm back into the forest, his plan was almost complete. This was a very good sign. Even if the vegetation on the ground wasn't petrified, the king stoneworm's aura was still very intimidating to the various beasts in the forest. Sensing the king stoneworm's approach, the fearsome beasts hurriedly avoided it. This made it much easier for Xiaoxian to move forward. Without any disturbance from the fearsome beasts, Xiaoxian smoothly made his way to his destination. It wasn't a short journey, and when he crossed the river, the sun was already setting. When the sun set and night arrived, Xiaoxian was still some distance away from the king stoneworm's nest. He had to rush through the night. Fortunately, he had special vision at night, so he could maintain his speed in the forest at night. When a hunting team entered the forest, they would consider the distribution of fearsome beasts and members to decide whether to go in a straight line or take a detour. But now, Xiaoxian was alone, with a king beast following behind him. In this forest that Xiaoxian was familiar with, no fearsome beast would have the mind to attack Xiaoxian when a king beast approached. Therefore, Xiaoxian boldly ran through the shortest distance. The night passed, and when the dark sky began to brighten, Xiaoxian finally saw the tall mountain. Probably sensing a familiar scent, the king stoneworm behind Xiaoxian suddenly sped up. It was so excited that it couldn't control its strength. A large patch of grayish-white appeared on the ground and expanded rapidly. The king stoneworm didn't break out of the ground. It was still underground. Not only did it not come out, it even burrowed deeper into the ground. Xiaoxian could sense that the king stoneworm was far away. The grayish-white patch on the ground stopped expanding. Xiaoxian also concealed his aura. He had done what he needed to do. Roar, roar, squeak. In the mountain ahead, the cries of various beasts could be heard. The beasts that entered the mountain while the king stoneworm was away were greatly frightened. They scrambled to get out of the cave. The king of the mountain had returned. How could they have the courage to stay in the mountain? Chapter 686. Xiaoxian rested beside the king stoneworm's nest for about an hour. He hunted a fearsome beast and shared it with the Cha-Cha. Because the king stoneworm had just returned, all the other fearsome beasts in the area had fled. They wouldn't come near for a while, so Xiaoxian wouldn't have any trouble staying here. Not long after the king stoneworm entered the mountain, the commotion died down, and everything calmed down. The king stoneworm didn't come out of the mountain again. Xiaoxian could sense that the king stoneworm was at the bottom of the mountain. It seemed to be in a good mood too. Although it didn't show much emotion, Xiaoxian could guess that it was happy to come back. Was it really lost? It had no sense of direction and couldn't figure out how to get back to the mountain. All it could do was run in a random direction, but it ended up going further and further away. How stupid. However, its strength was feared by many people and beasts. If Xiaoxian hadn't lured it back, it would probably have caused a lot of trouble in the mainland. It didn't care where you could petrify. It would stop wherever it wanted. With its intelligence, it didn't think too much and didn't have any complicated thoughts. Because of this, no one could predict what it would do if it started to act recklessly. Luckily, it was all over now. The bat leader that was left at the Flaming Horn headquarters should be returning to its nest soon. Xiao Xian's heart burned with excitement when he thought about the bridge that appeared on the flaming river. That was a bridge that spanned hundreds of thousands of meters. He didn't know what the bridge was like. Could it meet his standards? The more he thought about it, the more restless Xiao Xian became. After eating the fearsome beast meat, he recovered a lot of energy. Looking at the clouds in the sky, Xiao Xian got up to extinguish the fire and clean up the traces. Then he set off. Xiao Xian met Duo Kong and the rest along the way. It turned out that after crossing the long bridge, Duo Kong had brought people to chase after Xiao Xian. He thought that if Xiao Xian needed help, they could help. He didn't expect Xiao Xian to have already settled everything. Has the King Stoneworm gone back? Duo Kong asked. It's gone back. It probably won't come out again unless there's another disaster, Xiao Xian said. That's good. That's great. Duo Kong said a few words in a row. They really didn't want to fight against a King Stoneworm. Also, the King Stoneworm seemed to be more powerful than the salt beast they had seen before. The King Stoneworm was so powerful that it could even turn water into stone. How could they fight against such a beast? Knowing that the Beast Kings wouldn't pose a threat to the tribe for the time being, everyone felt relieved. Duo Kong told Xiao Xian about what happened on the bridge. We can really walk. We all came from that bridge. Yes, from that bridge. It's not like a wooden raft that sinks. It's stable. It's like walking on solid ground. Duo Kong looked excited. In his impression, the so-called bridge was mostly just a huge piece of wood, just like the tree trunk they used to cross the artificial river outside the tribe when they were on the other side of the sea. But now he saw a real bridge. Only then did he understand the meaning of the word bridge. So a bridge could look like this. So a bridge could cover such a long distance. This was a shock to his mind. When the disaster happened, the tribe came here from the connected wooden rafts. Xiao Xian had also mentioned the bridge. But at that time, everyone thought differently from Xiao Xian. They didn't think it was necessary and impossible. Now it had really happened. They didn't rely on manpower. They used the King Stoneworm's power to complete it. When he thought about how this bridge belonged to his tribe, Duo Kong couldn't help but feel proud. Just like the other tribes, Duo Kong thought that since Xiao Xian was the reason for the formation of this bridge, it must belong to Yinjiao. He would fight anyone who wanted it. How could there be such a long bridge in the Central Plains? The slave masters on the other side of the sea always acted like they were superior. But did they have such a long bridge? No, none at all. Only Yinjiao had it. It was the only thing in the world. Didn't you see how many people are staring at it? They're still gathered at the bridge and won't leave. They say they want to walk on it. Duo Kang's smile almost reached his ears. Xiao Xian was also happy to hear this. Indeed, many people here would think of building a ship when they saw a river. Very few people would think of building a bridge directly. Plus, the flaming river was so wide that even fewer people would want to build a bridge. This time, it was a success. However, they couldn't be too happy just yet. How long could the bridge last? Whether it could withstand the flaming river's current would require time to prove. When they returned to the tribe from the forest, they also brought back news that the King Stoneworm had returned to the mountain. This meant that the King Beast crisis was truly over. The Flaming River trading point was in a state of jubilation. The people who had been guarding the trading point all this time were hoping that the people on duty would come and trade with them soon. Only then would they be able to personally see the legendary bridge made by the King Beast. A miracle. It really is a miracle. EC stood in front of the stone bridge, carefully examining the miraculous bridge that had appeared here. Grasshopper's entire body was tense. The thorns on his back stood up. Even though the King Beast had left, the bridge made by the King Stoneworm still had the King Beast's aura. It might not affect other people, but for Grasshopper, who had the bloodline of a fearsome beast, it was different. Just a little bit of the King Beast's aura was enough to make him nervous. More and more people gathered around the stone bridge. It was only after Gigu sent people over to surround the area that they stopped their curiosity from going up the bridge. However, even if they couldn't go up the bridge, they could still see the Yinjiao team coming and going on the stone bridge. They had a rough idea of what this bridge was like. There were many dangerous elements in the flaming river. This was something that the expedition team had personally experienced. There were countless fish that were more ferocious than wild beasts. This was also why the Yinjiao people had always crossed the river by boat. The wooden rafts that Yinjiao used when they first came back had already been put away. As the apocalyptic day passed, all kinds of ferocious fish in the river became more active. It was no longer suitable for them to walk on the wooden rafts. Standing on the rafts would make it difficult to fight against the river beasts that jumped out of the water. But now the formation of such a wide and long bridge could solve many problems. This bridge was quickly given a name. Of course, it was named after the Crown River. Tall stone tablets were erected at both ends of the bridge. The tablets were carved with the Yinjiao totem and the words Great Bridge of the Flaming River. The indentations on the tablets were painted with crimson-red paint. It was very eye-catching on the gray stone tablets. There were many people from other tribes who came to watch the Yinjiao people place the tablets. Even though they couldn't get close, it still didn't dampen their spirits. Flaming River. Great Bridge. Someone read out the words on the tablet. Bridge. It fits the name of the bridge very well. It's really big. A bridge that could cross the Flaming River. A bridge that could withstand the wriggling of a king beast. A bridge that didn't even budge when the Yinjiao carried a huge stone tablet over. If it wasn't big, then who was? But some people thought that the word big must mean the size of the bridge. Maybe it was just a code name. Could there be a second or third bridge in the future? Someone asked in a low voice. The others didn't answer directly, but some people were thinking. As long as the king beast was still around, who could say for sure? Xiao Xian came to the bridge to take a look. At the same time, he asked the drumming tribe to help him take a look underwater. Even though he could use his senses to sense the situation underwater, with the help of the drumming tribe, he could see more details. Below the bridge, the part that was petrified was in the shape of an inverted triangle. The deepest part was more than 20 meters deep. There were no piers. If it weren't for the fact that the two sides of the bridge were connected to the shore, it could even be said that the bridge was floating on water. Was a bridge like this really sturdy? They could only wait and see. After investigating the stone bridge, Xiao Xian thought of the small river that was petrified by the king's stoneworm on the other side of the river. Even though the flow of that river wasn't fast, when the king's stoneworm petrified the water in that river, it directly cut off the flow of the river. After that, Xiao Xian brought the king's stoneworm back and cut off the flow of the river again. That was why there were now two bridges that cut off the flow of the river. There weren't many dangerous fish in that river. At most, there were some piranhas that lived near the flaming river. However, because the king's stoneworm petrified the water, there wouldn't be any fish that would come near for a while. Xiao Xian ordered people to set up a net at the upstream and downstream of the two stone bridges to prevent fish from coming near. After that, some Yinjiao warriors and drumming tribesmen went into the water to dig holes in the two small bridges. They couldn't bear to touch the big bridge above the flaming river, but they were willing to work on the two small bridges above the river. Clang! The chisel only left a shallow dent on the bridge formed by the petrified water. It's so hard. Really? Let me try. Clang! It's true. This hardness is comparable to high-quality stone, right? Isn't this bridge made of water? Why is it so hard? You don't understand the strength of a king beast. Hurry up. Let's dig a big hole here and use the stones to make stone tools. Yes. Hurry up. Curious about the quality of the stones, the people digging the holes in the bridge worked even faster. The chisels they used were made of new bronze, so it was easy to chisel. If they just wanted to clear the river, they didn't have to dig a hole. They could just dig another channel to go around the two bridges. However, the Yinjiao people wanted to study the stones, so they dug a bridge. It took some time to dig a hole. Halfway through, someone dug out a stone the size of a watermelon and weighed it in his hand. He said in surprise, "This stone is so light." Not far away, the travelers watching the Yinjiao people dig a hole snickered. Do you think we'll believe that? One of the Yinjiao people's lies. This stone is very light. Light my ass. Xiaoxian didn't stay there to watch them dig a hole. Duokong was guarding the bridge, so he didn't need to be there. Xiaoxian was called over by Ao to guard the 1,000-grain gold field at night. Since the king's stoneworm had left, they wouldn't meet the bat leader at night, right? However, when night fell, the bat still came. Xiaoxian stared at the bat leader that appeared again, and remained silent. Why aren't you leaving? Your little brother is waiting for you to come back. Chapter 687. The king's stoneworm had left, but the problem was no less troublesome than the king's stoneworm. It remained in Yinjiao's fields. It did not destroy Yinjiao's things, nor did it come out to scare people. Every night, at a fixed time, it would appear silently and cut an ear of grain from the 1,000-grain gold's fields. It would then hang on the long and narrow leaf of the 1,000-grain gold, quietly watching the people guarding the fields. She didn't know how it managed to hang on to the leaf with its weight, but the leaf didn't even change the angle of its fall. What do we do? After the bat leader left, Ao wiped his forehead helplessly and asked Xiaoxian. Even after a few more times, he could not remain calm in front of the bat leader. Every time, he would be so nervous that he would break out in a cold sweat. Xiaoxian could feel the direction of the bat leader. When it stopped flying, although Xiaoxian could not determine where it was hiding, he could feel that it was not far from Yinjiao. It was not going back to the Bat Mountain in the depths of the forest. The days passed, and the 1,000-grain gold in the fields gradually matured. It was not as green anymore. Maybe it was because the weather was good, or because it was well taken care of after the fertilizer was improved, or maybe it was because it was used to the soil here. All in all, compared to when it was on the other side of the sea, the 1,000-grain gold was maturing earlier. Based on the current trend, the 1,000-grain gold would mature in about 10 days. Hearing Ao's question, Xiaoxian thought for a moment and said, as long as it doesn't cause trouble for Yinjiao. You should have noticed that after it came here every day, there were fewer pests in the fields. In the fields, there were more grains that were about to mature at this time of the year. The more this time of year, the more insects there would be. Many strange flying insects would fly out of the forest, or insects that would come out of the ground to nibble on leaves or fruits. There were also insects that came from the forest after smelling the scent. The people guarding the fields had to get rid of many insects every day. The edible ones were all supplied to the trading point. The people at Yinjiao headquarters were tired of eating roasted insects. The green ducks also had a limited appetite, so they could not get rid of all the insects. As for those that couldn't be eaten, they would be kept as fertilizer. It was fine during the day, at least they could see and clean it up easily. However, it was much more troublesome at night. The local crops were about to ripen, and for those insects, the temptation of food was greater than their natural inclination towards light. The effect of the bug trap of the water moon stone was quite limited, but after the bat leader appeared, almost no flying insects appeared at night, and the field was quite quiet. This kind of phenomenon appeared in some of the fields not far from the 1,000-grain gold. It saved everyone a lot of work. No one could tell whether the appearance of the bat leader was a blessing or a curse. Of course, it didn't mean that bat leader was here to help Yinjiao get rid of the insects. Xiaoxian felt that it was waiting for the 1,000-grain gold to mature. Many animals didn't need anyone to teach them. They were born with the ability to sense things that were beneficial to them. Now the bat leader was staring at the 1,000-grain gold, because it felt that the 1,000-grain gold would be beneficial to it. In this special field in Yinjiao, other than the 1,000-grain gold, there were also some seeds from Jeju. Some of them were good grains, but bat leader didn't appear in those fields. It only stared at the 1,000-grain gold. We'll see when the 1,000-grain gold ripens, said Xiaoxian. Ao nodded. That's all we can do. As long as the bat leader didn't cause too much trouble, and didn't cause too much damage to the flaming horns, they could still afford a small portion of the 1,000-grain gold. Just treat it as a reward for the bat leader. After estimating the ripening time of the 1,000-grain gold, the tribe had already started planning for the harvest. When they were at the other side of the sea, the harvest of the 1,000-grain gold was very lively. Now there were more 1,000-grain gold planted in the headquarters. The scale of the operation was also larger, so they had to plan carefully. Although the other fields weren't as crazy as the 1,000-grain gold, they still had to consider. Harvesting from the fields and the Flaming River Bridge kept Xiao Xian so busy that he didn't have time to continue studying the monster in the secret underground room of the Flaming River Castle. After the King Stoneworm's crisis was resolved, the Flaming River trading point didn't calm down. Instead, it became even more lively. From the beginning to the end of the incident, it didn't take long. At the very least, it didn't involve the trading point for long. The teams that left in a hurry didn't go far at all. Some people just found a place to rest and wait for news after they left. No one expected that instead of the Flaming River trading point being destroyed, they would receive news of a miracle on the water. At that time, the king beast suddenly charged out of the ground and turned the surrounding forest into stone. Many people died. They all turned into stone. At that time, the king beast went straight for the Flaming River trading point. Yinjiao's chief was there too. He brought his people to meet the king beast. After that, he talked about how he witnessed the battle. The people who went to investigate came back and vividly described the situation at that time. The others in the group were stunned when they heard it, and then they began to shout. The person who told the story stood on a large rock with one hand holding a knife at his waist, and the other pointing upwards. I heard Yinjiao's grand elder shout at the king beast, "Follow me." And then, what happened? The others asked expectantly, "What happened?" So the beast king left with him. The crowd immediately hissed in disbelief. That was a beast king. How could it follow someone so obediently? They didn't believe it anyway. The person standing on the rock looked around. Seeing that no one believed him, he became anxious. "If you don't believe me, go and take a look." Wherever the king beast went, it turned into stone. The forest outside the Flaming River trading point is all turned into stone. There are traces on the ground too. Go and take a look. The path of petrification stretches from the forest to the Flaming River, then crosses the Flaming River, and reaches the other side. Really? Someone's heart started to waver. But they couldn't imagine the situation. "Why would I lie to you? Let's go, I'll take you there." The king beast is gone anyway, it's no longer a threat. I'm guessing that this is all Yinjiao's scheme. It's all part of Yinjiao's plan. When the team returned to the Flaming River trading point and saw the petrified forest and the traces on the ground, they couldn't help but believe it. Although the rumors were exaggerated, some things were true. Many travelers who left the trading point beat their chests and stomped their feet. Why didn't they insist on staying longer at the Flaming River trading point? As a travel team, especially those with rich experience, they were curious about many things, especially those shocking things. But they missed it this time. But even if they missed the chance to see the king beast, seeing the traces left behind by the king beast would still make them feel better. Hence, no matter if it was the area the Flaming Horn tribe marked as their territory, or the long bridge that spanned across the Flaming River, travelers all stopped to look at it. And those who left also brought the news to all parts of the mainland. Yinjia became popular again. Not only was it popular, it was even more popular than the last time the Flaming River trading point was built. The names Yinjiao, Flaming River trading point, and Flaming River Bridge were spread everywhere. Now in all the other trading points on the mainland, as long as there were travel teams, large or small trading points or resting areas, there were people talking about the Flaming River Bridge that Yinjiao used the king beast to build. There were many trading points in the Flaming River. Many people weren't interested in the Flaming River's trading point and didn't want to travel all the way to see it. However, the king beast had built a long stone bridge that spanned the entire river. This piqued many people's curiosity, and they formed groups to go to the Flaming River. Whether it was the suspicion of the Flaming Horn tribe's king beast, or the curiosity of the king beast's bridge, many teams were attracted to the Flaming River trading point. Whether it was to find out the truth, or to see a miracle, more and more people gathered. Humans tended to follow the crowd. Even if people from smaller tribes were cautious about the king beast's visit, they would still want to join in the fun when there were so many people around. In the past, before the Flaming River trading point existed, they would spend most of their time inside their tribe or in the forest near their tribe. However, ever since they came to the Flaming River trading point, they fell in love with the lively chatter and excitement. Not to mention, they could even trade for things they wanted there. This was also why the Flaming River trading point was getting more and more lively. In the forest not far from the Flaming River trading point, 7 long-winged birds gathered together. There was a person sitting on each bird. At this moment, they were all looking at the gray stone bridge in front of them. Other than Wu He, the other 6 people were shocked. Too bad you didn't see what happened. What a pity. Wu He looked at his companions who had just arrived at the Flaming River trading point with a sorrowful expression. He almost said, "You're all Chong Li's for nothing." Someone's eyebrows twitched. They wanted to mock Wu He, but it was a pity that they couldn't witness the magnificent feat of building a bridge with their own eyes. That was one of the biggest regrets in life. It was rare for them to be interested in something like this. Let's not talk about that. Wu He, what are you planning to do? Another person was impatient with Wu He's smug expression and urged him. They had just arrived, so there were some things they didn't know. Wu He, who had arrived earlier than them, was probably the most familiar with this place. They needed to find something else to comfort themselves with. My target isn't the trading point. Let's go to Yinjiao's headquarters. There should be a lot of good stuff in Yinjiao's fields at this time. Wu He smiled and rubbed his hands together. His eyes were filled with anticipation. During this period of observation, Wu He noticed that while everyone was focused on the Flaming River trading point, the Flaming River Bridge, and Yinjiao's new land, Yinjiao's headquarters were doing something strange. With his observation skills, he could see that Yinjiao's headquarters were planning something else. It had nothing to do with the trading point or the Flaming River Bridge. In the end, his conclusion after a few days of observation was that there was something good in Yinjiao's fields. Something good. The other's eyes lit up. That was right. This was the season to start harvesting. Good, good, good. We finally have something to do. No matter if there was really something good there or not, they would still go and check it out personally. They didn't want to be idle anyway. Are we going now? Let's go take a look first. Wu He patted his long-winged bird and pointed in the direction of Yinjiao's fields. Let's go. They didn't dare to go directly to Yinjiao's headquarters, but they could still approach the fields from the side. Yinjiao's fields were not small. Even if they were discovered by the Yinjiao people, there wouldn't be many Yinjiao people who could chase after them. But after he gave the order, he waited for a while. The long-winged bird under him didn't move. It remained in its original position. It wasn't just Wu He. The other 6 people's long-winged birds were the same. Let's go. Disobedient again? Wu He continued to urge them. He patted the long-winged bird. The long-winged bird made a coo sound and flew forward slowly. It flapped its wings half-heartedly, as if it was extremely unwilling. Its attitude was even worse than when they had approached the king beast. What's wrong? Someone asked. Coo! The long-winged bird beneath Wu He let out a cry. This caused Wu He to furrow his brows, and a few deep wrinkles appeared between his brows. There's something there that the long-winged bird is afraid of. Wu He looked at the direction they had planned to fly in. His expression was unusually serious. After the incident with the king beast, any abnormality would make him nervous. Even though they wanted to find something to play with, they still had to be cautious. Could it be that Yinjiao's tamed eagle you mentioned before? Someone guessed. No, it's not that. Wu He shook his head. The long-winged bird is afraid of the eagle, but not to this extent. Wu He patted the long-winged bird's neck. Some feathers were already standing up. This was a sign that the long-winged bird was very nervous. He looked at the others. They were all the same. During your investigation, did you find out any other secrets of Yinjiao? Someone beside Wu He asked. Wu He pursed his lips. Yinjiao's headquarters are too heavily guarded. It's different from the trading point. I've only been here for a short time. How could I have found out so much? Could it be that king beast? Someone else asked. Not likely. Wu He shook his head. After a moment of silence, someone laughed. Then we should go and take a look. As soon as this was said, everyone, including Wu He, laughed as well. The Chonglis were very curious. The more they didn't know something, the more curious they were. If they didn't find out, They wouldn't even be able to sleep peacefully. The long-winged bird's behavior didn't make them give up on their plan. Instead, it made them even more excited, especially the 6 people who came later. They thought to themselves, even if we didn't see the king beast, maybe we'll find something interesting. It would be best if we could uncover some of Yinjiao's secrets and sell them to other tribes at a high price. They were very happy with this thought. Chapter 688. Xiao Xian didn't go to the Flaming River trading point, as it was the busiest time for the harvest. Instead, he stayed at Yinjiao's headquarters, eating and sleeping in the farmhouse. Xiao Xian knew about the spies in the sky. Yinjiao had never relaxed their aerial surveillance, but to Yinjiao, their aerial power was still too weak. Now Yinjiao only had 2 birds that could monitor the sky. One was Gigu's snow falcon, and the other was a cha-cha. Because the bat leader was nearby, cha-cha wasn't at the headquarters. Instead, it went to the trading point. As for the headquarters, the snow falcon stayed at the core area, which was the mountain where everyone lived. In Yinjiao's headquarters, other than those 2, there was also a flock of green ducks that could fly. Not to mention whether they would listen to orders and fight, just based on their fighting ability. They were already very fat from the insects in the fields. They were no longer as weak as when they first migrated here. Their movements weren't as nimble as before. They didn't have as many giant mountain eagles as the Hui tribe, nor did they have as many tamed birds as the Feather tribe. Of course, they couldn't send their birds to attack suspicious people. Xiao Xian ordered the people on the watchtower to use their binoculars to monitor the spies. If they made any strange movements and flew directly towards Yinjiao, they would shoot them down with their bows. If their goal was open and aboveboard, they could have used the Flaming River Bridge to come to Yinjiao's headquarters. However, they flew in so sneakily, it was obvious that they weren't good people. They were just like robbers. Within the Yinjiao tribe, there was a tense atmosphere. There was no joy from the harvest as expected. How is it? Xiao Xian asked Ao, who was sweating profusely as he ran over. It's almost done. The wanderers have already warned them to stay at home for the next 2 days. Chi-Chi and the rest who are taking care of the fields won't be coming over either. The area around the fields is under martial law. Ao took out the water bottle hanging on his waist and gulped down a few mouthfuls of water. After a busy morning, his throat was almost smoking. As the 1,000-grain gold ripened, the Flaming Horn tribesmen, who had set their sights on this plot of land, suddenly noticed that the crops in the other plots of land were also ripening these past 2 days. Those were all crop seeds brought back from the other side of the sea. It was also the first time they had planted them. They didn't know if there would be other unforeseen events if they didn't harvest them in time. This was because some crops had an optimal harvest time. After that time, the quality of the fruits would severely decline. Yinjiao still didn't have enough manpower. They needed people at the trading point, and they also needed people here. Especially when the peak harvest season was coming, they would be even busier. But this year's situation was special. They didn't dare to let those young warriors who weren't strong come over to the fields. Instead, they arranged for them to stay at the edge of the fields. They found another 200 people from the drumming tribe to help with the harvest. Although the people of the drumming tribe looked fierce, they were trustworthy. They wouldn't steal when they were busy. Many people in the drumming tribe didn't have much to do during the day. Since Yinjiao needed manpower, and they were willing to pay, of course they were happy. But Xiao Xian also told them in advance that there would be certain risks during the harvest. They might encounter some difficulties and dangers, so they had to be prepared and not panic. The people of the drumming tribe weren't afraid of dangers. In the past, when they harvested water moonstones, they would also encounter dangers. That was why the drumming tribe's chief, Fan Mu, and the others didn't care. They felt that they could handle anything calmly. Of course, Yinjiao's main target was the 1,000-grain gold fields. That was what they valued the most. Is it here yet? Ao asked Xiao Xian in a low voice. The bat leader's matter wasn't made public. Ao only told the people guarding the 1,000-grain gold fields in private. Those who were sent here to guard the 1,000-grain gold fields were all trustworthy. They wouldn't say much. Xiaoxian knew who Ao was talking about. It's here. It's already in Yinjiao's territory. It's in the mountains over there. Xiaoxian raised his hand and pointed. Ao looked over. Over there was a stone mountain where the warriors used to train. There were no plants and it looked bare. However, there were some caves formed by natural erosion. The bat leader should be in one of the caves on the mountain over there. Now the warriors had many tasks every day. They didn't have time to practice hitting stones in the mountains. The smell of humans was almost gone. Sometimes, they could see some birds building their nests there. Now the bat leader was on the mountain over there. As the 1,000-grain gold ripened, the bat leader didn't go far. It stayed on the mountain and walked around the fields every night. No wonder I heard the patrolling people say there were fewer flying stone squirrels. It's because of this bat, Ao sighed. The bat leader really came. It wasn't just the flying stone squirrels. There were fewer beasts in Yinjiao's territory. Although there weren't many beasts in Yinjiao's territory, there were still a few mountains. There were many flying stone squirrels and other small beasts in the mountains where the wanderers lived. They would steal things from time to time and fight with the wanderers. But recently there were fewer of them. Even if they weren't natural enemies, the pressure of a high-level beast would still affect them. Even the few beasts in the tribe were only on the mountain where they lived. They weren't close to the fields. The wanderers were told to stay at home for 2 days. They wondered if Yinjiao was guarding against them and preventing them from stealing grains. Some of them muttered unhappily, but soon, they found that it wasn't just the wanderers who lived in Yinjiao. Even the Yinjiao people who took care of the fields were taken away. Other than the murderous Yinjiao warriors, it was hard to see anyone else. I just saw Yinjiao's patrolling team pass by. They looked serious, as if they were preparing to go to war. A person who had just gone out to pee returned to the cave and discussed with the others. Something must have happened. Isn't it for the grains? An old man didn't understand. Definitely not. Which tribe would look like that when they're harvesting grains? They're all like rocks, the young man said. Thinking about it, the Yinjiao people were indeed too serious recently. They didn't even smile much. Could it be a king beast? The woman who was tanning the animal's skin was so scared that her hands trembled. No, it can't be right. At this moment, everyone was unsure. After all, this place was similar to the fearsome beast forest. It was even more dangerous. At least when they were in the fearsome beast forest, they didn't encounter a king beast. Besides, why couldn't there be another beast king after the first one had come? It shouldn't be. If it was, the Yinjiao people would definitely let the children in the tribe hide first. But as far as I know, the Yinjiao people didn't do that. They just put the farmland under martial law. A middle-aged man who looked quite steady said while tapping his fingers. As they were talking, they suddenly heard footsteps coming from outside. The people in the cave were instantly silent. Heir 2, what's the hurry? The middle-aged man who looked steady hurriedly got up and greeted him. The person who came was he heir. He had a good relationship with Jiao Wu and the others in Yinjiao. After the wanderers were settled here, 3 people were assigned to take care of them. He heir's position was the second, so now everyone called him heir 2. He heir didn't waste any time talking nonsense. There was no trace of a smile on his face. He warned, "We just received news that the flaming horns asked us to listen for any movements. If we hear 2 hurried wooden whistles, we have to close the cave door." The middle-aged man handed a bowl of warm meat soup to he heir and asked in a low voice, "Heir 2, what happened? We don't feel safe. You know, the king beast incident just passed." He heir didn't argue. He took the bowl and drank it in big gulps. He was tired of going from house to house to inform people. After drinking, his expression softened. He thought for a while and said, "I don't know what happened, but it's definitely not a king beast. As for the notice just now, it was sent by the Grand Elder of Yinjiao, Xiaoxian." When they heard that it was Xiaoxian's order, everyone's expression changed. Who was Xiaoxian? He was the only Grand Elder in Yinjiao. His status was higher than the Yinjiao chief and shaman. He was the founder of the Flaming River Trading Point. Even the Flaming River Bridge was built by him. How could he lie? The people who were complaining at first didn't have any thoughts now. They just had to do as they were told. The Grand Elder was definitely right. Oh right, seal the windows too. Just leave some small holes for ventilation. Don't open the door no matter what you hear. Unless you hear the whistle again. He reminded them again before leaving. Ah, okay. The middle-aged man quickly replied. After he left, he went to the next house to inform. There were many caves in the mountains, and many tourists lived there. He had to finish his job quickly. Although the people in the caves still didn't know what was going on, they still made preparations according to the notice. The Yinjiao tribe's mountain was also full of preparations. Old Ku even set up many traps in front of the house. I heard that many birds will come. Let's make sure they don't return. Caesar helped from the side, but he still looked in the direction of the bat leader from time to time. His eyes were full of vigilance. Very quickly, another 2 days passed. Early in the morning, Xiao Xian informed Ao and the others. Get ready. The 1,000-grain gold will ripen today. It should be around noon. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the Yinjiao tribe became more solemn. Xiao Xian stood next to the 1,000-grain gold, looking at the golden plants. This time, the 1,000-grain gold plants were taller than the ones on the other side of the sea. There were more grains on each plant. The heavy grains swayed slightly in the wind, shining with a golden light. A wooden stick stood on the ground, its shadow getting shorter and shorter. In the distance, some birds flew over from the forest. As the 1,000-grain gold plants ripened, there were fewer insects. Many of their natural enemies had come. Some birds were omnivores. They ate grains and insects. They definitely didn't have anything to do with the insects. If there were only 2 or 3 birds, there was no need to panic. But what if there was a large flock? Xiao Xian whistled. 2 hurried whistles sounded. The people who heard the signal reacted immediately. The wanderers who had been told to stay in the house quietly heard the flapping of wings outside. Some people curiously looked out of the closed wooden door. Birds of all sizes were resting outside their door. From the sound of it, there were more birds around. Some people wanted to go out and catch one, but when they heard the whistle, they quickly blocked the door and closed the window. They looked out through the gap. More and more birds were landing. There were even birds fighting outside. In the sky, Wu He and the others looked down from the back of the long-winged bird. What's happening? What's happening? So many. Because they were flying high, they could see more clearly. In their field of vision, from the forest, flocks of birds were flying towards Yinjiao. To be exact, they were flying towards Yinjiao's farmland. Perhaps their target was the golden land that Yinjiao was guarding. The long-winged birds they enslaved were purely carnivorous, not vegetarian at all. They never ate grains, so they weren't very interested in the crops in the Flaming Horn's fields. Perhaps they noticed something special about the crops in the Flaming Horn's fields, but they weren't as crazy as the birds that flew here one after another. It must be something special, someone said excitedly. His eyes were burning. I heard that some Yinjiao people once appeared in the golden grain fields outside the royal city. Jiju of the golden grain fields gave them some gifts, Wu He said. Wu He had asked around and learned some things that surprised him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have set Yinjiao as his first target after crossing the sea. Hearing this, the others' eyes became even more heated. Could it be that the land below was planted with the seeds from Jiju of the golden grain fields? Maybe it's something that was secretly planted in the golden grain fields? Good. We didn't come here in vain. Chang Lu and the others couldn't help but rub their hands together. They couldn't wait to go over and sweep everything clean. What kind of place was the golden grain fields? It was the land of the famous Jiju. The grains that were produced there were important to the nobles of the royal city. The guards there were carefully selected. They weren't ordinary guards in the royal city. Among the fields outside the royal city, the golden grain fields were the most difficult to enter. If you tried to force your way in or sneak in, it was very likely that you wouldn't be able to leave. Not even a complete corpse would be left behind. Everything would be turned into fertilizer. But Yinjiao was different. It definitely wasn't as heavily guarded as the golden grain fields. Opportunity? Ha ha ha. I didn't expect such a harvest this time. Do you see those flocks of birds? Wu He pointed at the birds that were approaching the Yinjiao tribe. He said to the others, let's take advantage of the moment when those birds are causing trouble for Yinjiao. Do we need you to tell us that? With those birds around, they could reduce their presence and take advantage of the opportunity to harvest more. However, unlike the Chonglis, the 7 long-winged birds were all nervous. When they looked at the flocks of birds flying towards Yanjiao, their eyes were filled with pity. Xiao Xian stared intently at the 1,000-grain fields in front of him. There were soldiers holding sickles and other harvesting tools at every corner of the fields. They were waiting for Xiao Xian to give the order to start harvesting. Chapter 689. The wind carried with it the fragrance of the grains. Those with a good sense of smell would notice that as time passed, the fragrance of the grains in the air grew thicker. More and more birds flew over. Some of them had already started pecking at the fields nearby, but they were quickly caught and killed by the guards. The people from the other side of the sea had experienced the harvest of the 1,000-grain gold and were already mentally prepared. But the others were different. Although they had been told a few days ago about the possibility of this happening, it was not as intense as witnessing it with their own eyes. Especially the drumming tribesmen who came to help. They were still puzzled. It was just harvesting grains. Was there a need to mobilize so many people? Now, as they looked at the dense flock of birds gathering around them, they felt their scalps twitch. Thank goodness we didn't farm. The drumming tribesmen all thought at the same time. Whether it was the wanderers hiding in the caves, or the Yinjiao tribesmen on the mountain, they all saw the birds flapping their wings outside the house. Although most of them were not fearsome beasts, there were too many of them. They were everywhere outside. Old Ka heard the sounds of the traps he set outside, accompanied by the chirping of the birds. Caesar and the other fearsome beasts were busy at the top and bottom of the mountain. Soon, their mouths were full of bird feathers. But the strange thing was, the flock of birds only flew around the edges of the fields. They did not come close to the center of the 1,000-grain gold field. This scene was especially obvious when looking down from the sky. Why don't the birds fly over there? He looked at the situation below and asked his 6 companions. They know that it's the most dangerous place. After all, the Yinjiao tribesmen guarding there are the strongest in the fields. I heard that the Yinjiao tribesmen often hunt fearsome beasts. They must have a strong killing intent. Maybe the birds have sensed it too, one of them guessed. No, I feel that there must be something there that can make those birds afraid. Another person expressed his different opinion. Something dangerous? The first person sneered. Are you talking about a king beast? If there was a king beast there wouldn't be so many Yinjiao tribesmen. It can't be a king beast. He agreed. He had personally experienced the king beast incident and knew that the rumors were not as exaggerated as they seemed. The Yinjiao tribesmen would not send so many people to guard a place where a king beast appeared. Then what could be the reason? The others did not understand. Maybe the Yinjiao tribesmen made some medicine to repel the birds? Someone suddenly said. The others paused. Thinking about it this way, it was really possible. Speaking of which, none of the fearsome beasts that the Yinjiao tamed are here. He scanned the area again. He found out that the giant mountain eagle that chased after them only flew between the forest and the trading point. At most, it went to the mountain in the core residential area of the Flaming Horn tribe. It didn't fly to the Flaming Horn's farmlands even once. That has to be it. Thinking about it this way, the others felt that this should be the closest to the truth. They knew that in the fields of some slave owners, there were times when they would use some medicine to expel pests and birds. But those prescriptions had always been in the hands of very few people, and would not be easily spread out. If the Yinjiao tribe could get the seeds from Jeju, then perhaps they also had the medicine to repel the insects. No wonder the long-winged birds don't want to go near that place. He nodded. He agreed with that guess. Fortunately, the long-winged birds were their beast slaves. Even if they were unwilling, they would do as they were told. They just had to be careful when the time came. The medicine was only effective against insects, so it shouldn't have much of an effect on humans. Come, take some medicine first. One person took out a small wooden bottle from the cloth bag he carried with him. After opening it, he distributed the pills to the others. These pills were not specific to any particular medicine, but they could serve as a buffer. Even if they were poisoned, as long as they were treated in time, they would be fine. They were just going to steal a handful of grains. They weren't going to eat poison, so they would be fine. Quick, get ready. I feel that the Yinjiao people are about to make a move. Wu said. When the others heard this, they quickly gathered their thoughts and focused on what was happening below. In the 1,000-grain gold field, Xiaoxian quickly glanced to the left. It looked peaceful, but no one dared to go near it. There wasn't even a flying insect. There was a big bat there. It had been resting on the mountain 2 days ago, but since last night, the bat leader had been in the field. Even during the day, which it hated, it didn't leave the field. However, it no longer hung on the tallest leaves. Instead, it was hanging on the lower leaves of the 1,000-grain gold plants. Because every 1,000-grain gold plant was very big, the leaves on the top spread out. Even if they were long and narrow, when there were so many of them, they could cover some of Yangguang's vision. The bat leader hung in the shadows. If one didn't see it resting there with their own eyes, as long as they didn't look in that direction, it would be hard to notice its presence. At least, the guards outside the 1,000-grain gold field didn't notice anything strange. Patter, patter. On the heavy grain ears, grape-sized grains of the 1,000-grain gold swayed and collided with each other. The grains didn't have any obvious changes on the outside, but on the inside, they were slowly maturing. Xiaoxian's eyes flashed. He suddenly blew the wooden whistle in his mouth. The slightly long whistle wasn't loud. Instead, it sounded calm. But after this whistle, the air seemed to tighten. The atmosphere became tense and stagnant. This was the whistle for everyone to get ready. Whoosh! A sharp and hurried whistle followed. It was like the sound of a starting gun. The people who were waiting in all directions instantly shot out like arrows leaving the bow, heading straight for the valley that had been allocated beforehand. This was indeed more like a battle where every second mattered. The scythe made of animal bones easily cut through the tall stalks of 1,000-grain gold. The people behind him quickly collected the 1,000-grain gold and put them into large bags made of animal skin. Because there were too many 1,000-grain gold planted this time, the survival rate was much higher than the first time. Therefore, they didn't have time to cut the grains individually. They cut them all together. After they were done, they would find a place to deal with them. Otherwise, the surrounding birds would cause a lot of trouble. Everyone's assigned area and route had been planned beforehand. They wouldn't bump into each other while cutting, and they wouldn't take the same route. They would try their best to save as much time as possible. Except for one place. Xiaoxian didn't let anyone near the bat leader's area. That was the biggest variable. As long as they didn't provoke it, the harvest could be completed smoothly. If someone accidentally went over and provoked the bat leader, it would be more troublesome than being attacked by a flock of birds. At the same time, the surrounding flocks of birds that didn't dare to come near seemed to be fighting for their lives. They screeched and rushed over. Looking down from the sky, they could see a flock of birds forming an encirclement. They were closing in on Yinjiao's most heavily guarded field. This is our chance. Wu He and the others were excited. The blood in their bodies seemed to boil. Under the insistence of Wu He and the others, the long-winged bird could only reluctantly make a coo sound and then slowly fly towards that direction. As the flock of birds neared, the bat leader, hidden in the shadows of the 1,000-grain gold valley, opened its blood-red eyes. Whoosh! The wings wrapped around its body spread open. There was a slight sound of wind. In such a noisy environment, the sound of the wind didn't even cause a ripple. No one would hear it. But the moment it spread its wings, the flock of birds that were closing in on it suddenly stopped. It was as if someone had pressed the pause button. A strong, murderous aura came out of the 1,000-grain gold, especially in the air. The aura was directed at the birds that were flying close to it. The Yinjiao warriors who were busy harvesting the 1,000-grain gold valley were shocked by this sudden aura. The scythes in their hands almost fell out of their hands. A beast. After hunting for so many times, they could naturally tell whether it was a human or a beast. No, this wasn't a normal beast. This was much stronger than the beasts they had seen before. The air was thick with the smell of blood. There wasn't a drop of blood in sight, nor was there any smell of blood. But it felt like they were in a bloody fog. At this moment, all the shouts, arrows, horns, bones, metal, and birdsong seemed to have been frightened and came to an abrupt end. Hiss! The sound was like the sound of air rushing past. It wasn't loud, but everyone in the field heard it. This voice made everyone's hair stand on end. It was as if there was a bloody Fong that was ready to move, a massacre about to happen. Under the noontime Yangguang, the field seemed to be cut off from Yangguang. They couldn't feel the slightest bit of warmth. There was only a chill that made them shiver, and their teeth chattered. In the air, Wu He and the others were still far away, but they could feel the strange aura. Wu He shuddered and almost fell off his long-winged bird. Not only the 7 of them, but the 7 long-winged birds also stopped flying forward like the other birds. If it weren't for their masters wanting to go over, they would have retreated a long time ago. The rhythm of their flapping wings also became chaotic, so much so that they rose and fell, almost causing the frightened people to fall off their backs. "WWW, what is that?" One of them stuttered. They had been through a lot. Even if they didn't have the ability to distinguish auras like the Yinjiao, they could still sense that there was a dangerous creature there. They just didn't know if it was a human or a beast. "Why do I have a bad premonition?" Another person said. "What's there? A human? Or a beast? Could it really be a king beast?" "Impossible." Wu He immediately denied it. Then he said with uncertainty, "It shouldn't be. It definitely isn't the one that appeared last time. If it wasn't a king beast, then what was the source of that powerful aura? What secrets were the Yinjiao hiding?" "The Yinjiao are really cunning," someone said through gritted teeth. The others felt the same way. The Yinjiao had a lot of secrets, but they didn't dare to rashly investigate. "What do we do?" The other 6 looked to Wu He. Wu He's words sometimes made people want to beat him up, but some of his decisions were right. At times like this, they believed in Wu He's decision. Wu He solemnly looked down and said, "Continue to wait. Those birds won't give up so easily. As long as they keep moving, then what Yinjiao is hiding is definitely not a king beast." Even if there were tempting food in the area where a king beast appeared, normal beasts and ferocious beasts wouldn't dare to approach. However, the birds stopped for a moment, then began to pace back and forth, as if preparing for another attack. "No. It really isn't a king beast." The person next to Wu He was overjoyed. For them, as long as it wasn't a king beast, then it was worth the risk. If it was a king beast, then they would leave without another word. No matter what secrets Yinjiao had, no matter what treasures there were, they would leave immediately. Just like when the king stoneworm appeared in the forest outside the trading point, Wu He threw down his cup and left. They would do the same. But there was no king beast now, right? So what if it was risky? They had taken more risks since they were young than the grains they ate. The 7 of them once again paid attention to the situation below, waiting for the movements of the birds to decide when to make their move. In the 1,000-grain gold field, the soldiers harvesting the crops had paused when the powerful aura appeared. However, Xiaoxian quickly reminded them to return to their task. No matter what danger there was, as long as the Great Elder was here, everything would be fine. After the incident with the king beast, the people of Yinjiao trusted Xiaoxian very much. Even if something happened, they wouldn't blame Xiaoxian. The Great Elder's motive was always for Yinjiao's good. "Xian, those birds are flying over again." Ao pulled his bow and aimed an arrow at the sky. The flock of birds was too large. Even someone with good archery skills couldn't face such a large number of birds calmly. "Wait. Don't shoot for now. Pay attention to that side." Xiaoxian pointed his chin in the direction of the bat leader. The bat leader was starting to get angry. That was just a warning. After all, it was daytime, and it didn't like to go out in the day. Flying beasts didn't like bows and arrows. Forget about the other fields. It was better not to shoot at the 1,000-grain gold field and the surrounding fields. After all, the bat leader might fly out at any time. If someone accidentally shot and angered the bat leader, this already busy harvest operation would be even more difficult to succeed. Ao thought about it and agreed. He put down his bow and focused on the bat leader's position. He and Xiaoxian didn't participate in the harvest operation directly. Instead, they stared at the bat leader. After all, no one knew what the bat leader was going to do. If something happened, they would be able to react immediately. In times of danger, those with high status and power would definitely be the ones to take the lead. The smell of blood in the air was getting thicker and thicker. If it wasn't for the valley around them, everyone would have thought that they were in a killing field. Some of the warriors' arms were shaking as they waved their sickles. This wasn't because they were timid. It was a psychological and physiological reaction. They were nervous. Under such strong pressure, they could still maintain their normal harvesting and not pull out their sickles to defend themselves. This was already very good. The speed of the flock of birds slowed down. Some birds started to retreat, some hesitated, and some continued to approach boldly, heading straight for the swaying golden grains. The birds that approached didn't immediately rush down even when they were above the 1,000-grain gold field. However, these birds that had gathered gradually blocked Yang Guang from above. Just as the flock of birds above finally decided to swoop down, and the surrounding birds that were watching also spread their wings and prepared to shoot down. Whoosh! A black shadow flew out from the shadows of the valley, brushing past the golden grains and heading up. As it rushed up, invisible and inaudible sound waves were emitted. Bang! 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 The closest flying bird was directly turned into a cloud of blood mist. It didn't even have the time to let out a final cry of shock. When that figure charged towards the densest flock of birds, a blood-red color, accompanied by a series of explosions, spread out in the air like a crimson disk. The flock of birds that blocked Yang Guang's view was replaced by a bloody mist. Under Yang Guang's gaze, the mist spread out and landed on the field. If before, it was only because of the strong aura that made people feel like they could smell blood, then now, it was real blood. The people harvesting below, whether they were on the 1,000-grain gold field or the other fields nearby, the drumming warriors who came to help, the sentries on the watchtowers, etc., all saw the horrifying scene above the field. The bat leader's attack was only aimed at the flock of birds, but the people harvesting in the field were also affected. They had to stop what they were doing and cover their ears, feeling like their heads were being pierced by thousands of needles. Those who were further away were better off, but those who were closer to the 1,000-grain gold fields suffered the most. However, they were the strongest among the people in charge of harvesting. As long as the bat leader didn't target them, they could still handle it. They just felt uncomfortable. Ao clenched his bow tightly and looked up. He didn't care about the bloody mist falling on the ground, only focused on the battle above. No, it couldn't be called a battle. It was a one-sided massacre. A flock of birds lured by food and an enraged half-king beast. It was obvious who was stronger. There was a heavy grain hanging from Xiao Xian's head. The bloody mist from above covered the grains in a layer of red. Xiao Xian plucked a grain and wiped away the layer of blood on it with his finger, revealing the golden shell underneath. The 1,000-grain gold shell seemed to shine even brighter. Xiao Xian thought back to when he first found the nutrients needed for the growth of the 1,000-grain gold. He looked at the golden grain in his hand. Perhaps the growth and ripening of the 1,000-grain gold was destined to be accompanied by blood. This was a golden light born from blood. In the sky, the explosions no longer continued, but the bat leader did not seem to intend to let go of the birds that had angered it. It still did not stop chasing them, but this time it used its sharp claws and fangs. After the bloody mist, there would always be some shredded bird corpses. Some of the bird corpses were so shriveled that there wasn't even a drop of blood left. Some of them were even incomplete. It was obvious that the bat above was very cruel. The flock of birds seemed to have been woken up and scattered in all directions. Of course, there were still some bold ones. While the bat leader was chasing other birds, they went to the 1,000-grain gold field, thinking that they could achieve their goal. Unfortunately, the Yinjiao people were already there. The harvesting continued. The people in the sky and on the ground were also busy. Wu He and the others, who had been avoiding the bat leader's attack, saw their chance to attack. The Yinjiao people and the terrifying bat didn't notice them. Chance. Go. Quick, quick, quick. Grab a handful before the grains are all gone. Chapter 690. The tense atmosphere at the Yinjiao plantation didn't affect the other side of the flaming river. Even though they couldn't see the Yinjiao plantation from the flaming river, they could still see the strange movements in the sky. The flock of birds there was too eye-catching. Some people who came to see the flaming river bridge were arguing with the Yinjiao soldiers guarding the bridge. They came all the way here, just to take a look at the bridge, and personally experience what it felt like to be built by a king beast. However, the Yinjiao people didn't let them pass. If they didn't let them get on the bridge, what was the point of coming all the way here? Threats and promises were useless to the Yinjiao soldiers guarding the bridge. No matter what you said, their attitude was firm. As long as you weren't a Yinjiao, you weren't allowed to take a single step onto the bridge. Even though the soldiers guarding the bridge didn't stay at the headquarters to participate in the harvest, they knew that no outsiders were allowed to disturb them. These people said they were going to take a look at the bridge, but who knew if they would run straight to the Yinjiao headquarters? Their chief had already said this morning that no one who wasn't a Yinjiao was allowed to take a single step forward. More and more people from other tribes gathered around. The leader of the expedition team looked at the people behind him, then looked at the Yinjiao soldiers guarding the bridge. In terms of numbers, they had already outnumbered the Yinjiao soldiers. Why don't we just use force? From time to time, there were some noises from the crowd, increasing the tension in the air. You think you can stop us? If you don't let me see, then I'm going to see. The crowd pushed forward, and the people in front couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. The Yinjiao soldiers guarding the bridge immediately pointed their blades and spears at them. Most of the people in the expedition team weren't good people. They were already very impatient when the Yinjiao people didn't let them onto the bridge. They didn't believe in the exaggerated rumors about the Yinjiao people. Other than coming here to see the legendary bridge, they also wanted to test how capable the Yinjiao people were. Everything was just 1 step away, and the push from behind just now had become the trigger for the situation to explode. Just as the chaos was about to erupt, a loud bang suddenly came from above Yinjiao's headquarters. When they looked up, they saw a bloody explosion in the sky. The bloody scene extinguished the flames of anger in their hearts, and they all stopped what they were doing. Even the Yinjiao soldiers guarding the bridge turned their heads to look. They didn't know what had happened over there, but from the looks of it, it should be something good. After all, those that had exploded into a bloody mist were the flock of birds that had come to snatch the grains. What is that? Someone asked in a trembling voice. I don't know. I heard that it's the territory of the Yinjiao tribe. What happened in Yinjiao? I keep having the feeling that there's something scary over there. The person who spoke even shuddered. He wasn't the only one. Everyone else had the same feeling. After all, those who could join the expedition team and reach here safely were definitely not weak. The people who gathered around stopped clamoring to get on the bridge. Yinjiao seemed to be very dangerous, so they decided to observe the situation first. The guards looked at the headquarters worriedly. From here, they could only see the mountains at the headquarters and the surrounding forest. They couldn't see what was happening in the fields, so they couldn't leave. They could only pray in their hearts that everything would go smoothly over there. At the back of the crowd, a few people exchanged glances. They saw the surprise in each other's eyes, and they changed their plans at the last minute. Like the Chonglis, they also came from the other side of the sea, but they weren't as fast as the Chonglis. They originally planned to use these curious people to distract the Yinjiao guards, so that they could sneak in with the others and take a look at the Yinjiao tribe. They didn't expect that it would be so dangerous over there. I heard that the Chonglis already sent people over there, someone said in a low voice. The others exchanged glances with each other. Everyone knew what was going on. Looking for trouble and looting a burning house was what the Chonglis did all the time. With the Chonglis here, Yinjiao definitely wouldn't be peaceful. They should wait and observe for a while. They didn't want to meet the Chonglis. On the other side of the bridge, Ta personally led a group of people to guard this side. If the people on the other side couldn't hold on, he would still be here. They definitely couldn't let those people come over today. Recently, because of the Flaming River Bridge, more people came to the Flaming River trading point. These people were also bolder. Some even wanted to test Yinjiao directly. How troublesome. The mission here was also very important, but Ta was also worried about the fields. Perhaps the others didn't know, but as one of the 2 leaders of Yinjiao, Ta knew about the bat leader. Because of this, he was even more worried. At the same time, above Yinjiao's fields, the bloody mist gradually dissipated. The surroundings were filled with broken feathers and bone fragments. The birds were either shot down, killed, or sucked dry. Their corpses fell to the ground one after another, while the Flaming Horn tribesmen were busy dealing with the stealing birds, and the bat leader was chasing after the birds. 2 shadows suddenly dashed towards the Flaming Horn's farmland. They were running towards the 1,000-grain gold. Watch out! Be careful! The person who shot the bird shouted when he noticed the intruders in the air. Just as the Flaming Horn tribesmen drew their bows, a large black shield opened up above the figure that flew past them. The shield spun rapidly. This was the Chongli's shield made of gum. It was much lighter than metal and stone. They usually disassembled this shield into multiple pieces, and only put it back together before a mission. The person behind the shield started to transform. Totem patterns appeared on his face and arms. Especially the arm that was holding the shield, it immediately swelled up. His muscles tightened and green veins protruded. He held the 2 black shields firmly in each hand. The 2 people holding the shields were indescribably excited. Every time they were on a mission, they would feel this way. This kind of tense and exciting atmosphere made them so excited that they couldn't help but shout. Tuck, tuck, tuck. The arrows were blocked by the black shield. The arrowheads pierced into the shield, but they didn't bounce back or pierce through. They were stuck there. In order to save arrowheads, the Yinjiao people used wooden arrowheads when shooting ordinary birds. For larger birds, they used stone arrowheads. Only birds like ferocious beasts would use metal arrowheads. The Chongli's people came so suddenly that the people holding the bows didn't have time to change the arrowheads. Therefore, the first batch of arrows were all made of wood. The arrowheads were stuck on the 2 black shields. There were also people who used stone arrowheads in order to shoot down the larger birds. In that instant, they also attacked, but the arrows they shot out were also unable to break through the strange black shield. They were also stuck on the shield, neither bounced off nor penetrated. The 2 figures holding the black shields became like hedgehogs in an instant. However, they didn't really hurt the people and birds behind the shields. Ao also intended to attack, but he saw another figure further away in that direction. The bat leader was sucking the blood of a ferocious bird. If he attacked, if he missed the target, the spear was likely to go directly to the bat leader. If he angered the bat leader, would it change its target to people on his side? However, because of that little bit of hesitation, Ao lost the chance to hit the target. It was very difficult for him to hit the target again. The chance was gone in a flash. Just as the 2 people behind the black shield were feeling complacent, a long spear with a green tip pierced through the air towards one of the shadows. The cyan spearhead fiercely stabbed into the black shield. The sharp tip of the blade pierced through the shield, and a part of the impact spread along the shield during the collision. The dense number of arrows stuck on the black shield were instantly shattered. Apart from the arrowheads that were still stuck on the shield, many of the arrowheads had already been shattered, and scattered. The spear that pierced the black shield didn't stop moving forward. The strong impact continued to push the spear forward and break the shield. At that moment, the person behind the black shield felt as if time had stopped. His pupils shrank because of the sudden shock. He could even hear the sound of friction between the spear and the shield. The place where the shield was broken seemed to be scorched by the high temperature. If the shield was of any other color, there might be a circle of scorch marks on the place where the spear broke through. There seemed to be a burning air entering his nose. The person behind the shield saw the blue spear that reflected the cold light getting closer and closer to him. He didn't even have time to react. It was too late. He didn't think. Fortunately, the spear brushed past his forehead in the end. At the same time, his hands that were holding the black shield, under the impact of the spear, seemed to have been attacked by the claws of a ferocious beast. Lacerations appeared on his hands, extending from the web between his thumb and index finger to the top of his arms. Blood spurted out from these wounds like arrows of blood. His whole body was also brought back and fell off the back of the long-winged bird. The hands that were holding the 2 black shields also loosened. The long-winged bird below him also lost its balance. It rolled down a few times before flying away in panic. It didn't stop even after taking an arrow to the butt, and the person who fell off the back of the long-winged bird was caught by his companion in the next moment and carried to the back of another long-winged bird. The person who was rescued stared blankly at the arm in his hand, then looked at the spear that fell with the shield. He couldn't help but swallow a few times. Just now, both of his arms were almost shaken off. What terrifying strength! And because they wanted to save him, the person who originally planned to create a diversion was exposed in advance. There's still someone else. They still have companions. However, just as everyone's attention was on the two people who came later, two more figures rushed in when no one was paying attention. They didn't directly rush into the center, but at the border, through the gaps exposed by the guards, they quickly flashed past. As they flew past, the person on the long-winged bird's back shook his arms. His originally normal arms shrunk in an instant, becoming as small as a child's. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, outlining the clear outline of his arm bones. He swung his arms slightly, and as the long-winged bird flew past, his outstretched fingers became as slender as hooks. He grabbed at the air, and with a flick of his arm, he scooped up a bag full of 1,000-grain gold that was held by a Yinjiao warrior. The place where the Yinjiao warrior had grabbed the bag was cut open, leaving only a piece of animal skin in his hand. The bag was taken away. After the attack, the person pulled up. The Yinjiao warrior didn't have time to do anything else. He could only watch as the person left. Some 1,000-grain gold still fell from the opening of the animal skin bag that wasn't tied tightly. The same thing happened in another part of the 1,000-grain gold field. Someone suddenly came in and took away a bag of 1,000-grain gold. The bag was full and tied up, but they didn't have time to move it to the warehouse. Now it was taken away by a sneak attack. The two of them smirked proudly. If it weren't for the Flaming Horn's tight security, they would have been able to steal even more. However, they probably wouldn't have another chance after this, so they had no choice but to retreat. Let's go! Coo! There was a bird call in the air, and the intruders all retreated. As they left, they let out strange cries, like the cry of a victor after a battle. All of this happened in the span of a few breaths. Ao's expression changed when he saw this. His expression was ferocious, even ruthless. It was obvious that these people worked very well together. They made full use of each other's strengths and weaknesses, using each other's strengths to make up for their weaknesses. If they weren't still in the Flaming Horn's territory and needed to continue working together, they would have immediately flown in different directions. And once they left Yinjiao territory, even if Xiao Xian called Cha-Cha back to continue chasing, they wouldn't be able to catch up. After all, there were 7 of them, 7 birds. Ao was about to give chase, but Xiao Xian stopped him. You stay here, I'll go. Between Ao and Xiao Xian, one of them had to stay behind. After all, the harvest wasn't over yet, and there might be other variables. Someone had to stay here to watch over things. After hearing Xiao Xian's words, Ao reluctantly stopped. After all, it was useless for him to chase after them. Xiao Xian could still get Cha-Cha to help. After saying that, Xiao Xian flew in the direction of the figures in the sky. Wu He looked at the 2 bags of fruit in his hands, his face full of pride. Yinjiao, that's all there is to it. Exciting. Haha. Did you see the faces of those Yinjiao people? I didn't see it, but it definitely won't be good. Ha ha ha. My arm was almost crippled, but it's good that we got it. I didn't see those Yinjiao people's faces, but I'm sure they'll look like they've been smashed with bird poop. Hee. Hey, don't be so happy yet. There's someone chasing after us. Someone beside Wu He interrupted the laughter of the others. Wu He looked down. There weren't many trees here, and he could see the person running through the trees. Seeing that the person was running so fast, and the distance between them was quickly closing, Wu He's eyes flashed with surprise. However, he didn't stop smiling. Instead, he said with some interest, "That's Yinjiao's great elder." What, that's the kid? Isn't Yinjiao's great elder an old man? Someone didn't understand. Most of the elders they had seen before were middle-aged and elderly. Don't worry about him. That kid can't fly. Well, he didn't care. Chapter 691. After Xiao Xian chased after those people, the atmosphere in the field became heavy. They were too careless. If they had been more cautious, perhaps none of this would have happened. At least, those people wouldn't have been able to escape so easily. Ao was filled with regret now. Even though Xiao Xian had warned them that there were others watching them, and they had been on guard, after the bat leader showed its might, they thought that no one would dare to come close. Who knew that those people would be so bold? They were crazy. Weren't they afraid of being targeted by the bat leader? Wasn't the explosion of those birds a lesson? But it had already happened, and it had happened in an extremely humiliating way. 2 bags of 1,000-grain gold had been stolen in front of everyone. It was like a slap to the Yinjiao people's faces, a vicious slap. The Yinjiao people present were stunned. Although the 2 bags of 1,000-grain gold were not even 1/10 of the total harvest, this was a different matter. It was a failure for the hunters to have their prey stolen, let alone the 1,000-grain gold that they had been taking care of for so long. Perhaps the trading point, the king beasts, the flaming river bridge, and other things had made the Yinjiao people arrogant. They were no longer as vigilant and cautious as they should have been. This was a big mistake. Even Ao himself had to admit that he had been in a bad mood recently, especially when he hadn't thrown the spear decisively. If he had cooperated with Xiao Xian and thrown the spear, even if they still couldn't change the outcome of the stolen grains, at least 1 or 2 people would have been left behind. He looked up at the sky again. The bat leader was killing even more savagely. It probably knew what was happening below, but it didn't chase after them. If it did, it would have to give up on this more important place. It could only guard here. It wasn't a tamed beast, so it wouldn't be as obedient as a cha-cha. Its goal was different from the Yinjiao people. It would be angry if something was stolen from under its nose, but it wouldn't chase after those who stole the grains. It knew how to weigh the pros and cons. It would only guard the more important place. Relying too much on external forces was not good. Ao sighed inwardly. The timing of those people's appearance was too good. If they had been a moment earlier or a moment later, they might have failed. Perhaps they had also considered the attitude of the bat leader and the craziness of those people. He had thought that only a bandit was capable of such a feat, but who would have thought that there were others as well? The robbers liked to appear at night, but these people were at noon, under the scorching sun, under the watchful eyes of everyone. Ao felt that compared to the theft, this slap was even more painful. Of course, now was not the time to blame himself. There was no time to reflect. Keep your spirits up, all of you. It's not over yet. Ao roared. So what if he was unwilling? It was better to settle the matter at hand first. This time he would treat it as a lesson. Ao didn't think that Xiao Xian would be able to stop all of them. Looking at their actions and cooperation, he knew that they were all veterans. Cha-Cha alone wouldn't be able to stop all of them. At the side of the flaming river bridge, Ta turned to look at the sky. 7 figures flew past the forest not far away. They probably knew that there were people guarding this area, so they didn't approach. Instead, they continued to fly upstream. Although they were a little far away, with Ta's eyesight, he could still roughly see them. He looked at the familiar animal skin bag, then at the plants that fell from time to time. He couldn't hold back his anger anymore. Someone actually stole the 1,000-grain gold. Ta also noticed Xiao Xian's tracks. Xiao Xian was chasing after those people. He moved his feet. He wanted to chase after them personally, but when he saw the people on the other side, he paused. He raised his hand and pointed at the people beside him. You guys follow them and see. The foreign tribesmen on the other side of the flaming river couldn't see what was going on because they were further away. They were still discussing what was going on, but soon they saw it. On the other side of the river, where the Yinjiao headquarters were, there were people riding birds in the sky. It looked like they were planning to cross the river. The people behind the crowd saw this and understood. Weren't those the Chonglis? From the looks of it, did they succeed? To be able to steal from Yinjiao's headquarters, the Chonglis were indeed powerful. If that was the case, Yinjiao could only admit defeat. In the sky, after Wu He's group of 7 snatched the 2 big bags of grains, 2 of the long-winged birds were severely injured, and their flight was affected. They were also carrying arrows. The other two long-winged birds carrying the animal skin bags couldn't fly high because of the heavy load. Flying high took a lot of energy. Wuhi's group also had a severely injured person. The long-winged birds were even more tired because they were carrying two people at the same time. Although the snatching was short, it took a lot of energy, especially the 7 long-winged birds. They were under a lot of pressure. Even if the giant bat wasn't a king beast, it was more of a threat to them than the king stoneworm, because bats could fly. They had finally completed the mission, under a lot of pressure. Now that they relaxed, they felt very tired. To conserve energy, and for the 7 of them to work together better, the 7 birds didn't fly too high. Of course, that was only compared to their usual height. Even if they weren't high, it wasn't a height that the beasts on the ground could reach. They flew above the forest, and maintained a certain distance from the canopy. This allowed them to conserve energy, and avoid the threats on the trees. This was the height that many experienced birds liked. Cha-Cha also maintained this distance in the past. As long as they flew fast enough, the people on the ground wouldn't be able to hit them, unless they were sharpshooters. They chose to fly upstream, because there weren't many people on the flaming river. They definitely wouldn't fly upstream, because they didn't want to enter the forest full of fearsome beasts. They had to cross the river. On the other side of the flaming river, the tribes weren't evenly distributed. This was what Wuhi found out. He also knew that the Yinjiao people had gone downstream before. There must be more Yinjiao people downstream, who were familiar with Yinjiao. If they flew there, they would be watched. But upstream was different. As long as they crossed the river, there would be fewer tribes upstream, and fewer people watching them. That way they could escape faster. We're already out of Yinjiao territory. If we continue forward, we'll be in the forest full of fearsome beasts. Let's cross the river, Wuhi said. The others didn't object. They signaled for the long-winged birds to change direction and prepare to cross the river. Once we cross the river, we'll split up, Wuhi said. Suddenly his eyelids twitched. What's wrong? The others saw this and looked around nervously. They didn't see any suspicious flying objects in the sky. They didn't see the giant bat, because they didn't see the giant mountain eagle that they were supposed to meet either. But that kid was still following them closely. Anything out of the ordinary? Wuhi asked. Other than that kid still following us, we don't see any other threats. The others looked around again and said with certainty, that's good. Wuhi felt that he was probably overthinking things because he was too nervous. He didn't underestimate Xiaoxian. As the grand elder of the Yinjiao tribe, someone who could lure the king beast away, he must be special. However, the main reason why Wuhi didn't think much of him was because Xiaoxian couldn't fly. Even the king beast that was causing a ruckus outside the flaming river trading point couldn't do anything to them in the air. Without the giant mountain eagle's help, what could the grand elder of Yinjiao do at a time like this? Not even a fart. Wuhi poked his head out and looked at the people below who hadn't given up yet. He then looked at the flaming river that was getting closer and closer. The smile on his face grew wider and wider. They were already here, and that guy didn't have an eagle to help him. There was no bridge here either. How was he going to cross the river? There were many big, vicious fish in the river. Let's see how you're going to catch up. The river was getting closer and closer. The 7 long-winged birds were no longer paying attention to the people below. Among the 7 of them, only Wuhi was still staring at the people below. Just as the 7 long-winged birds were about to fly into the river, the people in the forest jumped out and jumped high into the air. Seeing this, Wuhi couldn't help but laugh. You think you can fly just because you jump high? Do you think you can fly? But soon Wuhi couldn't laugh anymore. Whoosh! There was a sound like a strong gust of wind. A blazing flame rose from Xiaoxian's body. A strong gust of wind swept up from below. The wind fanned the fire, and it soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the flames gathered together and formed a giant that suddenly stood up in the air. A strong sense of oppression seeped out and filled the air. The rapidly rotating gust of wind made the figure formed by the flames blurry. The flames that floated out of the giant's body didn't make it look strange. Instead, it made it look even more intimidating, like the mane of an angry beast. The 7 Chonglis, who were closest, felt it the most. They had never felt such pressure before. Such a majestic aura seemed to be able to crush people. The flame giant was almost at the same level as them. They couldn't see its eyes, only its silhouette. But Wu He and the others had an illusion that the giant's eyes were staring at them. Wu He could only feel the bones in his body creaking. The other 6 people's faces also changed. Fear, panic, helplessness. Their fingers were trembling, and they felt like they were about to suffocate. The 7 long-winged birds even forgot to flap their wings. Everything was out of their control. There was an unexpected obstacle. And just at the instant when they were stunned, the flame giant moved. It raised its palm and pressed down, as if it was swatting away flies, slapping over. The blazing gust of wind carried an irresistible force. It didn't give Wu He and the others any time to react. They could only watch as the giant palm slapped down. The people who were watching from the other side of the bridge gasped when they saw this scene. Their mouths were agape and their eyes were wide open. Their jaws were about to fall off. What the hell was that? They only saw a giant made of flame suddenly appear. And then with a palm, those people in the air were slapped down. Just like that, it slapped them down. Chapter 692. With that slap, 5 of the 7 long-winged birds in the air fell to the ground. The other 2 weren't hit directly, but were swept away by the force of the slap. They spun a few times in the air, and barely managed to steady themselves before crashing into a tree. These 2 birds were lucky, but the other 5 weren't so lucky. Although it was just flames, the force of the slap was real. When the flame giant's palm slapped towards them, it directly passed through their bodies. However, the force of the slap still carried a scorching air current, as if it wanted to burn them up, causing them to feel a burning pain. That was not a real flame. It was a fire seed flame that was activated by totemic power. It was similar to how some people would have flames on their skin when they activated their totemic power. Everyone could understand this, but the difference was that no one had ever created such a huge giant like Xiao Xian. This was not something they could understand. Perhaps only those who had participated in the Flaming River banquet would not be surprised by this. Many tribesmen were fearful of unfamiliar and seemingly powerful forces. The scene in front of them left them stunned for a long time. It wasn't until the flames on the other side gradually disappeared that they trembled, as if they were frightened. The Yinjiao tribesmen guarding the bridgehead looked away. Others might not know what that was, but they knew very well. They couldn't help but sigh with pride, as expected of the head elder. Thinking of the trouble ahead, the Yinjiao tribesmen guarding the bridgehead immediately became serious. They looked at the foreign tribesmen who were causing a ruckus. The head elder's actions just now gave them confidence. They didn't need to think too much. They just needed to do what they were supposed to do. If they couldn't stop these people, the head elder and the others would naturally deal with them. Seeing the Yinjiao tribesmen guarding the bridgehead looking at them, the one who caused the ruckus earlier changed his expression and forced out a laugh. Haha. He then turned and left. What a joke. They didn't want to go over and get slapped. They didn't want to rush over and meet the same fate as those who had been slapped. What if that flame giant had targeted them? Seeing that the situation wasn't right, they gave up on the idea of rushing in. Although the Yinjiao tribesmen were different from the rumors, they were still quite fearsome. For the time being, they didn't want to directly confront Yinjiao. As for the probing they wanted to do before, whoever wanted to test him could go ahead. In any case, they did not intend to continue. Let's go. Let's go to the Flaming River trading point and see if there's anything good there. Don't go back empty-handed. But boss, aren't we going to take a walk on the Flaming River bridge? Someone asked. When the Yinjiao issue is resolved, there should be a chance. The Flaming River bridge was secondary now. The most important thing was that their evaluation of Yinjiao had increased by another level. They knew what kind of attitude they should have towards different tribes. Since the troublemakers had left, the others were also scared and naturally wouldn't continue to stay here. The people at the back of the crowd glanced at the direction where the flame giant had appeared before they left. Since the Changle people had been beaten down, the Yinjiao people definitely wouldn't let them leave. They might even kill them and rob the Yinjiao people of their belongings. The Yinjiao people definitely wouldn't let them live. Fortunately, he didn't act rashly. The few of them looked at each other and saw the relief in each other's eyes. Forget it. It was better to observe for a while longer. They wouldn't go to the Yinjiao headquarters. They didn't want to follow in the footsteps of the Changel people. On the other side, Xiao Xian walked towards the 5 people who had been slapped down. 2 people had left in the sky. He didn't chase after them. Nor did he use the bone ornament to summon the flame giant to stop them. The 5 Changel people and the 5 long-winged birds all felt terrible after being slapped down from the sky, especially those who were already injured. Even though the one who was heavily injured was cushioned by the long-winged bird, he still fainted from the fall. The branches that had been broken by them struggled for a while before finally falling down. One of the Changel people who was groaning in pain was suffocating. His face was red, and he seemed to want to cough, but he couldn't. He could only breathe with all his might. The muscles on his face were contorted from the pain. He helped his companions who could still stand up. He looked at the approaching Xiao Xian cautiously. His gaze lingered on the green broadsword in Xiao Xian's hand for a while. The broadsword had a strong murderous aura. Even if it wasn't used to kill people, it must have slaughtered many ferocious beasts. Now, Xiao Xian's broadsword was pointed at them. Some of the people who had been slapped down had their legs broken. Some had even fainted. It was impossible for all of them to leave safely. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Someone was quickly approaching from the forest. First Elder. The people sent by Ta to help had also arrived. Looking at the 5 strangers, a fierce light flashed in their eyes. They walked towards them with murderous intent. However, they didn't attack immediately. Instead, they looked at Xiao Xian and waited for Xiao Xian to speak. Tie them up, Xiao Xian said. Huh. The people who had already drawn their axes and were thinking about how to chop them up were stunned when they heard Xiao Xian's words. They didn't understand what Xiao Xian meant, so they asked, chop them up first, then tie them up? No, keep them alive. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Wu He and the others breathed a sigh of relief. They had already been injured when they were fighting for Yinjiao's grains. The slap and fall just now had added to their injuries. Even Wu He, who was slightly injured, couldn't perform at half of his usual level, let alone those who were seriously injured. However, the Yinjiao people were different. Not to mention Xiao Xian, who had slapped them down, had other tricks up his sleeve. Even the Yinjiao warriors who came later would have a hard time defending themselves. This was Yinjiao territory. Wu He and the others had planned to fight to the death, but when they heard Xiao Xian say to keep them alive, they were overjoyed. They didn't want to fight recklessly anymore. As long as they could survive, the 2 who left would definitely call for reinforcements. Why? The Yinjiao warriors who came over didn't understand why the First Elder wanted to keep these people alive. In the past, they would just kill them directly. They deserved to die, just like those who robbed them. Not to mention, these people stole the 1,000-grain gold that was highly valued by the tribe. It was even more unforgivable. They should be killed and used as fertilizer. If it was anyone else who said this, they would have already complained. However, it was Xiao Xian who said this. Even if they had different opinions, they would still follow Xiao Xian's orders. They didn't have any grievances. They believed that the First Elder had his reasons for doing this. Knowing that Xiao Xian didn't want to kill them, Wu He and the others gave up resisting. They were worried that fighting would make the Yinjiao angry and change their minds. If they fell this time, then so be it. The most important thing was to stay alive. Only then would they have a chance to escape. Ta quickly came over with his men. He was still worried about this place. When he saw that the people who gathered on the other side of the bridge had already left, he only left a portion of his men behind and brought the rest to chase after them. Ta also didn't understand why Xiao Xian wanted to keep them alive. This wasn't Xiao Xian's style. He had never done this when he encountered robbers in the past. However, this wasn't the time to ask. He ordered his men to tie up the 5 annoying strangers with straw ropes. They even tied up the unconscious man and the 5 long-winged birds and brought them back. Most of the scattered 1,000-grain gold was picked up. A small portion was eaten by the birds and other animals in the forest. This made Ta even angrier. He wanted nothing more than to break the 5 men's necks. By the time Xiao Xian returned, The matter at the farmland had already been resolved. Seeing that Xiao Xian had recovered most of the lost grains, and even captured the 5 robbers, Ao Yinjiao's mood was much better. However, he still couldn't figure out why Xiao Xian wanted to keep the 5 men alive. He was the one who wanted to kill them. When he heard that 2 of them had escaped, Ao began to worry again. He planned to go back and discuss a defensive strategy. Those people cooperated too well, and the timing was too good. Moreover, they were from the other side of the sea. They must have other accomplices. He had to be careful. Keeping them alive is still useful. Someone will come and ransom them, Xiao Xian said. What can they use to ransom them? Ao asked casually. Money. Yinjiao didn't lack that. Food. They didn't lack that either. Metal. Unless they brought over nuclear seeds, they wouldn't be interested in ordinary metal wares. Yinjiao's new bronze wares were better than most of the metal wares on the other side of the sea. Then what other deal could tempt Yinjiao? Ao couldn't figure it out. If it was just some money, he might as well kill these people to vent his anger. That would make him happy. I need them to do something, Xiao Xian said. Although Wu He was a bit far from them, he could tell what they were talking about from the movements of their mouths. Thus he didn't need to hear. He could roughly guess what Xiao Xian and Ao were talking about just by looking. It wasn't complete, but he had a rough idea. Although he'd guessed that Xiao Xian had a use for them, or that he wanted to exchange them for something, he didn't expect that what they wanted wasn't money or anything else. That guy's goal seemed to be Chang'e, and not just the 5 of them. Wu He's heart skipped a beat when he thought about what had happened. Xiao Xian had slapped them down from the sky at the flaming river on purpose. He was using them to establish his authority. With Xiao Xian's speed, he could have slapped them down from the sky at any time. But he'd waited until they were near the river. At that time, there were many eyes on the other side of the river. They'd wanted more people to see how they were going to steal from Yinjiao territory. They hadn't expected things to turn out like this. They believed that those who saw that scene would temporarily restrain their restless thoughts. However, Wu He couldn't guess what Xiao Xian wanted the Chang'e people to do. Lock them up first. Xiao Xian pointed at Wu He and the others. Don't tie them up with straw ropes. Use chains. Straw ropes will make it easy for them to escape. Those who'd been thinking of ways to get rid of the straw ropes could only give up. The Yinjiao people had actually made these sturdy chains. After Wu He and the others were taken away, the farming stopped for the time being. Several Yinjiao executives gathered for a discussion. Wu He had already told them where they came from. Zheng Luo and the others had also heard of the Chang'e people. What else can the Chang'e people do besides cause trouble? Zheng Luo looked at Xiao Xian. Let them bring a letter to the other side of the sea. After all, we still have too few people. Zheng Luo didn't understand at first, but he quickly understood. His eyes lit up, and he clenched his fist and pounded the stone table beside him. That's right, we really don't have enough people. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.